You are my happy.
He hadn't meant to say it. He'd been half asleep. Unfair of James, really, being all sentimental around him in that state.
You are my happy.
He hadn't meant to say it. He had meant it, though. In retrospect, that was the real problem. He needed to end this. He knew that. The mark on his arm, a ticking clock. He just couldn't quite make himself let go. He never had something like this before. Something that was good. Something that was his. So he just kept digging a hole he wasn't sure he was ever going to be able to get himself out of.
Oi! Earth the Black!
Regulus blinks as Evan shoves his hand on his face, flapping it around as he tries to get his attention.
You're intolerable.
Regulus slaps the hand away, earning him a grin.
I love it when you talk dirty to me.
Gross.
Barty is leaning against the wall, his arms and ankles crossed in a way that Regulus knows he thinks is intimidating, but is very much the opposite.
Oh, don't be jealous, Barty.
Evan leans close to him, causing a look of utter revulsion to contort Barty's face. He shoves Evan away.
Merlin, cut that out. People are going to think you're a fucking queer.
Regulus doesn't react. He never does. Staring dully out at the hallway as kids mill about on their lunch break.
I doubt it. Besides, if I was queer, I'd aim a little higher than you. And you have standards, you know.
Since when?
Oi!
Evan tries to kick him, but Regulus smoothly steps out of the way, the corners of his mouth flicking up.
I'm serious.
Barty goes on, straight-faced. He'd been more of a buzzkill recently. Regulus reckons it's because his dad got another promotion.
You think the Dark Lord...
Merlin Barty.
Regulus's eyes bounce up and down the corridor, making sure no one is paying attention.
Little subtlety, please.
Barty's cheeks flush and his scowl grows.
He's not going to want a bunch of puffs in his order, is he?
Well, Reg thinks flatly. Bit late for that.
I'm pretty sure he has more important things to worry about than who you're shagging.
Evan claps Barty on the back.
But it's you that you think he cares.
Barty shrugs him off.
You haven't heard anything, have you?
Heard anything?
You know, from him, from the others. Anything they want us to do?
Sometimes the thing on Regulus's forearm squirms, wriggling under his skin like a real snake. Other times it burns. That's about the extent to which he's heard from Voldemort.
No. Why would I have?
Barty turns so that his back presses into the wall.
Fuck, I don't know. We're here, we could be useful, get information or something.
He kicks at the ground.
I'm just so bored.
Marilyn, me too.
Evan runs a hand down his face.
Who the fuck cares about runes when there's a war that's about to kick off?
I swear, if we're stuck here when it does.
Regulus isn't sure he'd mind, honestly. Easier that way. No hard decisions to make. No danger, just... There was a wizarding war? I must have missed it. I was in arithmancy. Somehow he can't quite believe it'll happen like that.
We need to do something.
Which sounds like a threat as far as Regulus is concerned.
And what exactly do you suggest?
Barty looks agitated as his eyes bounce around the corridor.
I don't know, just something. Something to get their attention.
I'm intrigued, Barty boy. Go on.
Regulus could smack him for encouraging this.
Preferably not something that will get us arrested.
Honestly, Reg, you have to get over that or I don't want to get arrested thing. It's really holding us back.
Regulus looks over at him, brow arched. It's hard to tell with Evan, when he's joking and when he's serious.
Besides, like I said, even if they did look us up, it wouldn't be for long.
He gives Regulus a playful shove and Regulus shoves him back, not feeling nearly as confident that anyone would come get them out of Azkaban. Their side might have control of the prison, but that didn't mean they'd risk it becoming public knowledge for the sake of 3 teenage morons.
Hey, what do you reckon the mentors sound like?
Regulus blinks, trying to catch up to the change in topic.
What do they sound like?
Yeah, like, are they voices deep? Or high and squeaky?
I'm pretty sure they don't have voices at all.
Nah. Come on. They must...
Flipendo!
Regulus looks over just in time to watch a third-year Hufflepuff get knocked off her feet. There's a moment of stillness in which everyone in the hallway seems to be in shock, staring at the girl, open-mouthed. Then her friends go rushing to her side, others looking round to see who hexed her.
Take that, you filthy mudblood.
Barty smirks as he slides his wand back up his sleeve.
Marilyn Barty. Warn Blook next time, will you?
Evan dramatically clutches his heart. To be honest, Regulus doesn't care one way or the other about the Hufflepuff girl. It's the stupidity that bothers him.
Congratulations, Barty. I'm sure the Dark Lord will be well impressed that you managed to jinx an unsuspecting 13-year-old. Definitely get his attention, that. Heck, I'll be surprised if he doesn't show up any minute and give you the mark right here. I mean, who needs to be clever about these things, right? Might as well just start doing whatever the hell we want, wherever the hell we want, regardless of who's around.
He watches the mirth drain from his friend's face, replaced by bitterness, but he doesn't care. Their positions are too precarious for idiotic stunts like that.
Well put, Black.
A new voice comes from behind him. Regulus closes his eyes for a brief moment and groans internally.
Look who it is, Reg. Your new best friend.
Evan is grinning a little manically as he comes to Regulus's side. Regulus turns to find Remus Lupin at his back. The Prefect is not looking especially good at the moment. Face pale, heavy bags under his eyes. It's clear he isn't sleeping. Lupin's gaze remains on Regulus for a second longer before it flicks behind him to Barty.
Crouch. Detention and 50 points from Slytherin.
4?
Lupin rolls his eyes.
I saw you cast it. Not particularly subtle about it, were you?
Barty's eyes narrow.
Your word against mine.
I hear that Dumbledore has a pensieve. I will gladly hand over my memory of the event.
With no defence left, Barty resorts to glaring, as though he can frighten Lupin out of punishing him. Regulus thinks that's unlikely.
Glad to see that won't be necessary. I'll let Slughorn know about the detentions.
Lupin doesn't look at Regulus as he pushes past them.
Hey, Lupin!
Barty stops the Prefect on his way down the hall.
Ho, ho, ho.
Evan elbows Regulus in his side.
This ought to be good.
I hear that dirty muggle mum of yours has gone and died.
Barty smiles cruelly, showing off all his teeth.
See, if I were you, I would have killed her myself years ago. You'd still be a filthy half-blood, but at least then you'd have some dignity, you know?
To his credit, Lupin doesn't even flinch, just stares back at Barty, stone-faced, for long enough that the Slytherin starts to fidget. Then he turns around and continues down the corridor.
Holy shit, my dude.
Evan grabs Barty by the shoulders and gives him a shake.
That was fucked up.
Barty's eyes have gone dark, following Lupin's back as he disappears around the nearest bend.
I meant it.
Regulus doesn't have a shred of doubt that that's true.
Uh-huh.
Evan slings his arm around Barty.
Let's go get some food, you little psychopath.
Regulus nods slowly, eyes on Barty.
Reg?
Yeah, let's go.
Barty is in a shit mood for the rest of the day, shoving and pushing his way through the corridors, cursing at just about everyone in sight. Evan finds it funny, though Evan finds most things funny. Regulus, on the other hand, finds it grating, which is why he tells them he's going to the library after last period, speeding off down the hallway before either of them can say anything about it. He might actually go to the library. He hasn't decided. The problem is that he'll likely run into Lupin again if he does, and he's not sure he has the patience for that right now. So instead, he wanders, keeping to the quieter areas of the castle, away from the common rooms in the Great Hall. Between the end of the school day and dinner, the halls are generally pretty empty anyway.
Well, look who it is.
He stops at the end of the hall, turning around to find a smiling James Potter making his way towards him. His hair is a mess, glasses smudged, robes wrinkled, and yet somehow he still manages to be the most attractive person Regulus has ever seen. It's infuriating. James quirks his brow as he comes to a stop in front of him.
Reg?
Right. He's meant to speak.
Hi.
He wonders if James has talked to Lupin yet. He must have. Yet he seems a little too happy to have heard exactly what happened with Barty.
You okay?
James doesn't reach out, doesn't touch Regulus. He never does unless Regulus says he can. But still, it's too close for the hallway, so Regulus steps back.
Fine. What are you doing wandering the halls without your fan club?
He sees the flash of hurt in James's eyes at the distance between them, but he doesn't say anything.
I, was following you, actually.
James rubs the back of his neck, and it's then that Regulus realizes that James hasn't got any of his school stuff with him. It only takes Regulus a second to understand.
You saw me on your map.
I saw you on my map.
Regulus isn't exactly sure what to do with that information. On the one hand, his stomach does several somersaults at the thought of James looking for him, coming to find him. On the other hand, he wonders if he's the only one at this school with any fucking sense.
We really shouldn't be talking here.
Regulus's eyes do a quick circuit of the hallway, making sure they're still alone. That sucks some of the light out of James's eyes. Regulus feels guilty. He does. But he also doesn't step any closer.
Reg, we've been together for a year.
Which seems like a random and irrelevant piece of information to Regulus, but he at least knows enough not to point that out.
We have.
Regulus is wondering where the hell James is going with this and why he feels the need to do it in the middle of the corridor.
So, I don't want to do this forever.
That makes something in Regulus's chest stammer. It shouldn't, after all. He's been telling himself to end things with James for months. If James has decided to do it himself, all the better for Regulus. He just hadn't seen it coming.
You don't want to do this?
I don't want to hide.
Oh.
The relief he feels is enough to stop him from fully taking in what James is saying.
Yeah.
James's gaze bounces between Regulus and the floor, like he's not quite brave enough to hold his gaze.
I've been thinking, and obviously, coming out to the whole school would be a lot.
Regulus's eyes instantly go back to the end of the hallway, and then over his own shoulder. He really does not want to be having this conversation here.
But maybe we could just start smaller, telling our friends.
Whatever relief he had felt about James not wanting to finish with him immediately evaporates.
No. I'm sorry, but haven't we already had this conversation?
He sees James straighten up and he knows this is going nowhere good. Knows he has to rein in his frustration. But that's never been his strong suit.
Yeah, we have. And I've told you I don't think you need to be so afraid.
The answer is no. It's always going to be no.
Regulus thinks of Lucius back in Scotland. Thinks of the hungry look in his eyes.
I'd be careful if I were you. Wouldn't want Bellatrix to find out about your little boy toy.
We're too big for hiding, Reg. You and me. Can't you see it?
Because if she finds out what you've been doing, and, God forbid, with whom, that poor boy is going to find himself dismembered.
No, I don't see it.
This time it's James who steps back, like he's just been hit.
Surely you have to know that there's no other way. Not with me.
But James looks back at him defiantly.
People will surprise you.
He thinks of his mother, of Bellatrix.
No. They won't.
Just my friends then, that's it. That's all I'm asking.
Your friends? Meaning my brother?
Yes.
Merlin, have you lost your mind? No, James. No.
Regulus keeps checking over his shoulder. Over James's. Merlin, he hates this.
I think I can talk to him.
James keeps pushing for reasons that Regulus can't fathom.
I think I can make him understand that...
Take it from someone who has been trying to make Sirius understand for the last 15 years. You can't. He won't.
And if he makes a scene, if other people find out, if it gets back to their family... Merlin, this is so stupid. He's been so stupid.
Look, I know you're worried about how he'll react.
You have no fucking idea what I'm worried about.
He watches James tense at that, clenching his teeth as he lowers his hand.
Then tell me. Tell me what has you so stuck, Reg.
And for a moment, he almost does. They'll kill you. They'll kill me. Hell, they'll probably take out your parents just for the fun of it. I have no choice. I have nowhere to go. I'm putting you in danger every day, and I don't know how to stop. I let them carve him into my skin, and sometimes I swear I feel his heart beating over top of mine. But he doesn't say any of that. Instead, he takes another step back.
I'm not having this conversation here.
James's face clouds over.
Sure. Fine. Whatever.
He turns sharply on his heel, hands shoved in his pockets as he starts heading back in the direction he came from. Regulus feels a lump in the back of his throat. Fuck.
James.
Careful, Black. Wouldn't want anyone hearing you use my first name. They might get the wrong idea.
He delivers the blow seamlessly. Doesn't even slow down to it. It's work for Regulus not to flinch as he watches James round the next corner, disappearing from sight.
Fuck.
For half a heartbeat, he actually considers going after him. But he can't. Can't risk causing a scene. Can't risk being overheard. This whole conversation was already dangerous enough. He sighs, scrubbing at his face with his hands. He really can't wait for this day to be over. Safe to say when he turns up for prefect duty that evening, he is not in the best of moods. He isn't seeing James again until tomorrow night, and that means he's stuck just sitting with this fight? Was it a fight? Are they fighting? His skin feels itchy, a pit growing in his stomach that he can't seem to get rid of. It's all stupid. This thing with James was never going to last. He should be happy that it's coming to an end in such a mundane way. Maybe it'll hurt them both less. No need for wars or monsters. Regulus can ruin this all on his own, thank you very much.
Hey!
He turns to see Cerci walking towards him, smiling enthusiastically. Not that she ever smiles any other way. Regulus arches his brow.
What are you doing here?
Wow, what kind of greeting is that?
Regulus tries to adjust himself, shaking out his shoulders, dragging up some amount of goodwill.
Sorry, bad day.
Well, it just got better.
Cerci places her hands on her hips, pigtails bouncing on either side of her head. Regulus has never known anyone in real life who wears their hair in pigtails before. He always assumed it was a style reserved for cartoon characters.
Has it?
I'm on prefect duty with you tonight. Sarah got sick or something and asked me if I could cover, and I was like, heck yeah, I'll take your shift with my partner. So, here I am.
Here you are.
Regulus is never entirely sure whether he's exhausted or amused by Cerci.
You really have to stop telling people I'm your partner.
She looks at him curiously as they start walking down the hall, away from the prefect office.
Why?
Because people assume you mean something else.
When she still looks confused, he tries again.
It makes them think we're involved.
Us?
Cerci grabs her stomach.
Oh my god, I'm getting a cramp. That's the funniest thing I have ever heard. You and me? A couple?
Regulus would like to be annoyed, but for some reason he finds himself smiling instead.
Stranger things have happened.
Merlin, have they?
She wipes at the corners of her eyes.
Besides, I could never allow it.
He arches his brow.
Oh?
Cerci shakes her head, pigtails bouncing ridiculously.
It would make my mother far too happy.
That almost gets a laugh out of Regulus.
Yeah, mine too.
Cerci meets his eye, something mischievous in her gaze.
Well, that settles it then. We can never date.
No, I suppose not.
She holds out her hand, and it takes Regulus a second to realise she wants to shake on it, like it's some sort of business deal. He indulges her.
To never making our mothers happy.
It's surprising he's able to laugh, given how miserable he'd been not 5 minutes earlier.
To never making our mothers happy.
The hands fall away, only for Cerci to link their arms.
Now,
They start walking again.
why don't you tell me about this terrible day of yours?
It's not that she isn't a menace, because she is. But strangely, Regulus has found over the past few weeks that he rather likes talking to Cerci Greengrass. As ridiculous as she is, there is something mildly awe-inspiring about someone who says absolutely everything they're thinking or feeling without a moment's hesitation. Regulus has never met anyone quite like her, so he tells her about this morning with Barty, and about James too, just leaving out his name and other details. A fight, he tells her, with a friend. It might be his fault.
So, apologise?
Cerci shrugs, causing Regulus to roll his eyes.
Yes, of course. Why didn't I think of that?
But when Cerci looks over at him, she is completely earnest.
Why didn't you?
Because it's complicated.
Complicated how?
It's just... he was being an idiot.
Cerci smirks.
It sounds like you just don't want to have to admit you were in the wrong.
I just admitted it to you, didn't I? Besides, like I said, he was being an idiot, so I was only partially in the wrong. 50% in the wrong at most.
She sends him a pointed look.
Uh-huh.
Regulus rubs at his face.
Apologizing doesn't come easy to me.
I never would have guessed that about you.
Cerci smiles as if that wasn't annoying enough.
Do you always just give up on things that don't come easy to you?
Regulus scowls.
No.
Well then, apologise.
He could, he supposes, apologise. Though he's not entirely sure he should have to. I mean, yes, He was a bit of an arse. But how many times is he going to have to explain to James that they can't be a couple? Can't be out. Not just for now. Not just temporarily, but ever.
Oh.
Cerci stumbles to a stop, pulling Regulus up short beside her.
What is it?
Regulus looks around at the empty corridor.
I think we may have found students breaking curfew.
Her cheeks pink as she holds back a smirk. Regulus opens his mouth to ask her what she's on about when he hears it. He turns to stare at the broom cupboard next to them in horror.
They couldn't have used a bloody silencing charm.
What do we do?
We could keep walking.
Pretty sure our whole job is to deal with stuff like this.
Regulus rolls his eyes.
What are we even getting them for? Breaking curfew?
Inappropriate behaviour?
Indecent exposure?
Technically, you don't know that they're indecent.
He sends Cerci a pointed look.
Sounds pretty bloody indecent.
Fair enough. I can do it if you want.
He waves her off, pulling out his wand and staring at the door, already feeling exhausted. He's beginning to think that Dumbledore gave him this prefect pin as some sick punishment.
Alohomora.
He flicks his wrist, perhaps with a bit too much force because the door not only unlocks but bursts open. Regulus looks very pointedly away, not wanting to see any half-undressed strangers.
Holy fuck!
Something cold drips down his spine. Of course. Of course it's him. Regulus looks up, entirely ready to give his brother a snarky lecture about being a slag, but all words die in his mouth when he sees Sirius with his shirt half open, hair a mess, leaning against the wall with one hand by Remus Lupin's head. He blinks, trying to make the image reform in his mind's eye, trying to figure out how he's seeing what he's seeing. There's a silence in which no one seems willing to move, or to address the situation.
You know what? I think they get the idea. We can just go now. You guys get back to your dorm. Have a good night.
Cerci reaches out, tugging on Regulus's sleeve, trying to pull him away, but he doesn't move. He knows he should probably feel happy. Or if not happy, relieved. All those years spent worrying about how Sirius would react to finding out about him, and he was the same way all along. But that isn't how he feels. He feels angry. This, he realizes, is why James thinks he can talk to Sirius. This is why he thinks that they can be out in the open. At least to some people. No doubt Sirius and Lupin are. James looks at them and sees a future. A future he and Regulus can never have. The injustice of it. That after everything, Sirius gets this too. The only thing Regulus has ever wanted. It makes him want to break something.
Regulus?
This is priceless, this is.
Regulus's voice wakes the couple up. Sirius quickly pulls away from Lupin, doing up his shirt, eyes wide with panic. Good, Regulus thinks.
Really never would have guessed it. Sirius Black. Teen heartthrob. Gay.
I'm not gay.
Regulus doesn't miss the way that Lupin flinches.
Really? And what exactly is your heterosexual explanation for being locked in a cupboard, half-dressed, with another bloke?
The fire is still bright in Sirius's eyes, but his cheeks are pinking.
And after all the shit you've talked over the years. Oh, come on, Reg, don't be such a fairy. Don't be so fucking queer. Only bent boys cry.
Regulus's expression is flat, staring pointedly at his brother, who looks about ready to crawl out of his skin.
I was a kid.
Oh, well, in that case, I guess you're only sort of a hypocrite.
Okay,
Lupin finally steps forward.
we're going now.
Yeah, we have to finish rounds, so...
Both Cerci and Remus start tugging on their respective Black brothers. Remus somewhat more effectively, guiding Sirius down the hall towards Gryffindor Tower. But Regulus isn't ready to let this go yet.
Detention.
Regulus brings the other pair to a stop only a few paces away.
For inappropriate behaviour.
Sirius looks back at him, face pale.
You can't do that. People will talk.
About what Sirius Black and Remus Lupin were doing alone in a cupboard, together after curfew. I should certainly hope so. You know how gossip travels at this school. And I'll be happy to supply any details people might be after.
Sirius looks like he can't decide between anger and horror.
You can't do that, Reg.
Regulus smiles coldly.
Watch me.
Sirius makes him move like he's trying to lunge at him, but Lupin pulls him back, stepping between the pair of them. He meets Regulus's gaze head on.
We both know you're not going to do that.
But Regulus doesn't back down.
Your confidence is unfounded.
Is it? We all have things we'd rather not get out.
Regulus doesn't need a mirror to know that the leer cutting its way across his face isn't pleasant.
What are you talking about, Moony?
Yes, Lupin. Do go on. Tell him. What are you talking about?
The two of them stare at one another unblinking. A face-off. A duel without wands. Waiting to see whose nerve cracks first. Lupin may not care about outing Regulus, but he won't do that to James. Regulus would bet his life on it. Eventually Lupin breaks, shaking his head as he turns back to Sirius.
Come on, let's go.
But Sirius isn't going anywhere. Not while this still hangs in the air.
Reg, I need you to do this for me, okay? I need you not to tell anyone.
Those words are like broken glass, shredding Regulus on the inside. When was the last time you gave a shit about me? He wants to say. About what I need. When was the last time you did anything but look down your nose at me?
No.
He sees the fear explode across Sirius's face.
Regulus, please, please, I'm begging you here, as your brother.
As my brother? You haven't been my brother in 6 fucking years, Sirius. So do us all a favour and spare us your grovelling. It's pathetic. Even for you.
Sirius opens and closes his mouth like a fish. No words making it out. Remus reaches out again, trying to pull Sirius away.
He won't do it. He's bluffing. Come on.
But Sirius is staring right into Regulus's eyes, into his steadfast gaze.
What do you want, Reg?
And oh, there are so many things. But the answer comes quickly enough, as though he'd had it planned.
Come home for Christmas.
Sirius goes so still it's startling, the blood draining from his face.
No.
Remus steps forward again.
There is no fucking way.
Regulus shrugs.
Fine. Then I suppose congratulations are in order. Hogwarts' first openly gay couple. What an honour.
They'll kill me, Reg. You realise that? They'll kill me if I go back.
No, they won't.
And they won't. They just won't let him go. But why should he get to? To walk away? Let him see how it feels to be stuck in a house with no air. Let him see how much harsher they've become, how much tighter their hands squeeze.
I'll give you time to think about it.
The boys in front of him continue to stand in horrified silence.
Though, if I were you, I wouldn't keep me waiting too long.
Regulus looks over his shoulder at Cerci.
Come on, let's go.
He starts walking towards her, but Lupin reaches out and grabs his wrist. Regulus isn't sure he's ever seen so much rage contained in one person before. It's impressive, really.
He'll never forgive you for this. You know that?
There is no doubt who the he in question is. Regulus feels his chest squeeze, but ignores it.
Isn't that what you want?
He rips his arm out of Lupin's grasp and pushes down the hallway. Regulus doesn't sleep well, bouncing between regret and satisfaction. For once, maybe Sirius will understand how it feels. How it really feels to be in Regulus's position. To have someone else holding your life in their hands and not being able to fight your way out. Or to run away, which has always worked so well for Sirius in the past. What was it Sirius had said to him? Better to be dead than to let them have you? Well, they'd see how much of that Gryffindor valor he really had, the smug bastard.
You're right there, Reg.
Regulus blinks, swerving just in time to avoid running into the open door in front of him.
You seem a little distracted.
I'm fine.
Regulus adjusts his transfiguration books as they head in the direction of the next class.
Mudblood.
Regulus is not really paying attention to Barty as they pass others in the hall. It's not an uncommon occurrence for him to be muttering that at people. The people around them barely bat an eye. That is, until a strong voice cuts through the buzzing chatter.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. What did you just say to me?
Regulus blinks, looking from Evan to Barty as they all come to a stop. Mary McDonald standing in the centre of the hallway with her hands on her hips and a storm in her eyes. Barty shifts uncomfortably. No one's ever called him out before.
You heard what I said.
Barty checks nervously about for teachers. Mary smiles at him.
Really? Because I have a small dick, which I have to admit is a weird thing to whisper in a girl's ear, but hey, whatever gets you off, I suppose.
Barty's face goes beet red.
Watch yourself, MacDonald.
Regulus finds himself inching closer in case he has to stop Barty from doing something stupid like cursing Mary McDonald in the middle of a busy corridor. She steps forward until the two of them stand toe to toe. It feels like she looms over him, even though he's a good 2 to 3 inches taller than her.
Does it make you feel strong? Spewing rubbish like that? Because personally, I think it's pathetic.
Barty opens his mouth to retaliate, but she doesn't let him.
Don't you ever threaten me again, Barty Crouch. You haven't even a quarter of the power that I have.
With that, she turns on her heel, Regulus spotting a concerned-looking McKinnon waiting for her at the other end of the corridor. Despite Regulus's fears, Barty doesn't move, doesn't reach for his wand or lunge after her. In fact, he stands frighteningly still, the hallway traffic slowly starting to make its way around him again. Most people giving him a wide berth, afraid of getting hit with whatever temper tantrum is coming.
I mean,
MacDonald is now well out of sight.
that was kind of hot.
Regulus turns to look at him, brow arched, and Evan instantly throws his hands up.
Listen, she's a grade A bitch. I'm not saying she isn't, but, you know, a hot one.
Regulus just shakes his head, not wanting to touch that, happy that Barty still doesn't appear to be paying them much attention, his dark eyes burning a hole into the floor where MacDonald had been standing.
Disgraceful, isn't it?
They turn to find Snape leaning against the wall, Mulciber looming like a bodyguard beside him.
Oh, piss off, Severus.
Evan waves his hand at him.
No, I mean it.
Snape eyes Barty, still turned back.
The way they're allowed to just strut about to treat us.
Listen, Sevy, I know the girls are not too keen on you, but you really shouldn't go making generalizations. Some of us do quite well with the ladies.
Evan gives him a wink that has Snape rolling his eyes.
He means mudbloods, idiot.
Evan looks over at him and frowns.
Pot. Kettle, no?
Did he just call me an idiot?
Evan gives Regulus a little nudge.
I live it when people prove my points for me.
Listen, you little...
Mulciber steps forward, but Snape holds out his arm, blocking his path before he can get too close.
There's no point in fighting amongst ourselves.
Regulus arches his brow.
You say that like we're on the same side.
Severus gives him something that is maybe meant to be a smile, but doesn't seem to have much goodwill in it.
Aren't we? We need to do something. Need to put them in their places.
That's what I've been saying.
Snape's eyes go bright, like a predator who's just caught his prey.
Excellent.
Snape licks his lips.
I've been thinking.
But Regulus doesn't hear what Snape has been thinking. Partially because he hates the kid and therefore tunes him out whenever possible, but also because at that moment, he spots James across the hall, gaze intent on him. It's hard to hold, all the anger in that look. The betrayal. Hard not to sink under it. James hasn't looked at him like that in a long time. Maybe not ever. For a second, Regulus wonders if James is going to confront him here and now. It would be so like him. But after a few seconds, he turns away, called by someone else.
James!
He doesn't look back again.
Oi, Reg.
Someone knocks into Regulus's shoulder and he looks up to find Evan staring down at him.
We gotta go. Transfiguration, remember?
Regulus blinks. Snape and Mulciber are already walking down the hall, Barty at their side. An unholy alliance if Regulus has ever seen one.
Right. Yeah, let's go.
Evan gives him a curious look.
You sure you're right?
Regulus swallows with difficulty, looking at the spot where James had been.
Of course.
As he walks through the door of the come-and-go room, the fire comes to life, candles lighting around the room, filling the space with a warmth that feels strange after coming from the green of the Slytherin dorms. This space is so familiar to him now. It feels like home. The room is empty, of course. He's always the first one. James comes after he spies him on the map, which means that Regulus now has nothing to do but wait. Normally he doesn't mind, but tonight his nerves are fried. He perches himself on the end of the bed, hands on his knees, trying to prepare himself. He focuses on his breath, on keeping it even, on staying calm. He can do this. He can. James doesn't keep him waiting long. It can't be more than 15 minutes before the door is opening again and James is walking in. The minute he sees Regulus, he stops, eyes hard in a way Regulus has never seen before.
You've heard then?
Yes.
He nods, waiting for James to go on, but he doesn't. Regulus knows, of course, what he ought to do. Apologise, just like Cerci said. More than that. Beg for forgiveness. Explain how infuriating it had been to realise that Sirius was once again getting everything he wanted. But, of course, he doesn't do any of that.
I suppose it must have felt nostalgic. The four of you sitting around bashing me. Any new insults I should know about?
Regulus looks up to find James with his hands in fists. Most people express themselves with their faces or their words, but James is all hands. The way they move and reach and hold. You can learn everything you need to know about him just by watching his hands.
I defended you, actually.
It takes Regulus a moment to realise what he's actually said. And even then he still needs to run the sentence over a few times before it sinks in.
Defended me?
Regulus wasn't expecting that. James nods stiffly.
I told Remus I thought you were afraid of going back to Grimmauld alone.
Regulus struggles between feeling insulted and at the same time feeling terribly, tragically seen. But James doesn't give him the chance to interrupt.
I said I doubted Sirius had just been an innocent bystander, that I was sure he'd goaded you into it.
Regulus feels his chest grow tight at the idea of James standing up for him.
Remus hasn't spoken to me all day, so that's been lovely. Tell me, Reg, what the fuck is wrong with you?
He's not fast enough to stop himself from grimacing.
Well, that's a bit of a loaded question.
James stares back at him, blank-faced.
Yeah, I'm not joking right now.
No, he certainly isn't. Regulus can't think of anything to say, so they end up just standing there staring at one another. Eventually James speaks again.
Remus says you won't tell anyone, because you know I won't forgive you if you do. But it won't matter because Sirius doesn't know that, so he'll still do what you want. That you're playing us both.
James's fists are still clenched at his sides.
I told him you aren't that manipulative. Was I wrong?
Regulus blinks.
What?
Was I wrong?
He isn't sure how to answer that question. He drops his eyes, thinking about it, trying to pick the truth out of his mess of intentions.
I don't intend to tell anyone. Too much drama for too little reward. But I was counting on Sirius not knowing that. I just tried not to think about.
James stares at him for a moment longer before shaking his head, turning around so that his back is to Regulus, hands at the base of his neck.
That's fucked up, Reg. You do realise that?
And for some reason that sparks something in him.
It's all fucked up.
That's a cop-out, Regulus.
No. It's the truth. It's all fucked up. It's fucked up that Sirius gets to do whatever he wants and get away with it.
What are you even talking about?
Regulus's nails are digging into his knees, the anger like a fuse, already lit and headed toward detonation.
What did he do last year, James?
That gets James to turn around again.
What has that got to do with this?
Because he'll do it again. Whatever the fuck it is that he did to hurt Lupin so badly, he'll do it again. And you'll all forgive him. You'll let it slide.
I didn't let anything slide.
Bullshit!
Regulus is standing now, facing James.
You and Lupin and everyone else. You let him get away with using you, with taking what he wants and giving nothing back, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of him getting everything.
James's mouth forms a firm line, eyes unmoved.
So what? You're the one who's going to punish him then, is that it? The one who's going to put him in his place?
Well, no one else is going to do it, clearly.
You're acting like a fucking baby, you know that.
Which is completely unfair in Regulus's opinion.
Oh, fuck you, James.
He's not going back to Grimmauld Place.
Regulus usually isn't that aware of the height difference between them, but just then he feels it. Feels those extra inches James has weighing on him, pushing him down into the ground.
Well, I guess we'll see, won't we?
No. He's not going, and you're not saying shit, understood?
Regulus glares at him.
But why? I thought people would surprise me, James. I thought there was no need to be so scared. If that's all true, then why the fuck does it matter?
Because he doesn't want it.
Oh, and whatever Sirius wants, Sirius gets. Right. You make damn sure of that, don't you? Running around, cleaning up his messes.
Shut up, Reg.
Tell me, does it ever get tiring? Being so far up his arse?
I said shut up.
One of these days he's gonna really fucking hurt someone. I mean really bad. And I can't wait to hear what you say then. How you defend him when...
Stop making it sound like Sirius is in the wrong. He hasn't done anything to you.
He's done everything to me.
Regulus is breathing heavily, his chest heaving up and down, and for the first time James looks something other than angry.
Reg, what do you...
Get out.
Regulus.
I said get out. Get the fuck away from me.
But of course James doesn't move. Not an inch. Just keeps standing there staring at him, with his two big eyes behind his two big glasses, seeing all of him. Seeing far too much of him.
What are you even doing here? Don't you have a mudblood to fuck?
Evans has been drooling over James for weeks, driving Regulus up the wall every time she sits next to him.
I'm sure your blood trade parents will be so proud when they find out. The Potter line turned to filth.
James goes stiff, staring at Regulus like he doesn't recognise him. And then, without a word, he turns on his heel and walks out of the room. The feeling of his exit echoes in Regulus's chest. And that's okay. It's fine. Good, even. James should walk away. That's what Regulus wants, what he's wanted for months. He starts pacing, struggling to get enough air, feeling as though his lungs won't expand. His ribcage suddenly shrunk to half the size. But it's fine. It's good, even. Inhale. Exhale. Nothing matters, especially not James Potter. Somehow he ends up on the other side of the room, gripping the fireplace mantle with both hands. This feeling will pass. He's sure of it. He's been through worse than this. If there is anything Regulus is an expert in, it's pain. And it always passes. Always. Besides, this is fine. Good, even. Now, he and James can go their separate ways. James can live his happy, perfect life, and Regulus can persist. And James need never know about the mark. Probably for the best. It would only hurt him. Regulus is still clutching at the fireplace, unable to take in a full breath, unable to quell the aching pain beneath his ribs, his lungs, his heart. He squeezes his eyes shut, trying to stop the world from spinning.
You are my happy.
He hadn't meant to say it, but he had meant it. That was okay, though. Good, even, because happy was never something he was meant to have anyway. He almost thinks he's imagining it when he hears the door open. His head snapping up as he turns around and sees James Potter walking back into the room. James stutters under Regulus's gaze, like maybe he's going to change his mind and walk right back out. But eventually he comes forward, sitting on the arm of one of the sofas facing the fireplace. He runs a hand over his face, looking exhausted. Regulus doesn't know what to say.
Thing is,
James looks down at the hands in his lap.
Sometimes I need to walk away. I always have. Even when I was little. I need space. I need to think.
Regulus stares at him.
To think?
He's fairly certain that any minute he's going to blink and realise that this is all a hallucination. James nods.
Yeah.
Then he looks back up.
But I'm always coming back.
Those eyes say, I know you. Say, I heard you giving up even if you never opened your mouth. James exhales, never looking away from Regulus.
I'll always come back to you, okay?
Suddenly Regulus has a visceral image of the day Sirius left. Of the empty bedroom, the missing chair at the table, his mother in one of her rages, burning his face off the family tree, and the weeks of waiting. For anything. An owl, a flu call, a muggle letter, but nothing ever came. The next time he saw Sirius was on the Hogwarts Express. His brother had barely looked at him, barely talked to him since. Regulus wants to tell James that people don't come back. They certainly don't come back for him. And maybe there's a good reason for that. After all, you don't drown yourself trying to save a dead body. Regulus leans against the fireplace and scrubs at his face.
You shouldn't.
Shouldn't?
Come back to me.
James doesn't seem surprised by this.
Do you not want me here?
James is impressively calm considering a few minutes ago. Regulus almost laughs.
You know I do.
James arches his brow and it takes a valiant effort on Regulus's part not to roll his eyes.
I want you here. I shouldn't, though. I wish I didn't.
James sits with that for a minute, eyes softening ever so slightly.
I know.
Part of Regulus wants to tell James to go, to build on this space between them, to stretch it and pull it until they can't reach one another anymore, until it becomes insurmountable. But the other part of him, the stronger, needier part, wants to walk over there and bury his face in James's chest, wants to feel his arms wrap around him, wants to listen to James talk his sentimental nonsense until he falls asleep.
You are my happy. What are you doing here, James?
James looks at him.
Why am I not fucking Lily Evans, you mean?
Regulus tries and fails not to wince, but he doesn't correct him.
Hoping you apologise, I suppose.
Regulus watches him.
For calling her a mudblood?
James nods slowly.
Among other things.
You really do hate that word, don't you?
James looks at him with something nearing disappointment.
Yes. I wish you did.
Regulus looks inside himself for the indignation that he knows James feels, but he comes up blank. Eventually he shrugs.
I don't feel anything about that word.
James grimaces.
I know.
The word sorry sits in Regulus's mouth, ready to be spoken, to be set free. Yet for some reason the idea of saying it makes his stomach squirm.
I'm sorry.
The corners of James's mouth twitch.
Thank you.
He runs a hand through his hair. When he looks back at Regulus, there's a hint of worry there.
I'm gonna need you to do something for me, okay?
Well, this doesn't sound good.
Okay.
I need you to tell Sirius that you won't out him to the school.
Isn't it enough that I tell you?
James shakes his head.
No. And there's another thing.
Definitely doesn't sound good.
I need you to do it under Veritaserum.
Regulus waits for the laughter, because surely this is a joke. His indignation must show on his face because James throws up his hands in a placating gesture.
Listen, I had to talk Remus down from having you make an unbreakable vow, okay? This was the compromise.
Regulus continues to stare at James like he's lost his bloody mind, which he must have.
This is a terrible idea.
You have a better one.
Regulus grinds his teeth. He hates Veritaserum. It makes him feel too exposed, out of control. It's violating. A shiver runs through him just thinking about it. Too much like legitimacy.
Reg.
He can see the concern in James's expression.
I'll do it.
But every part of him revolts against the idea.
But I have conditions.
James arches his brow.
Which are?
Regulus holds his gaze.
You're the one who does the asking.
There's a short pause before James nods.
Okay. Sirius will still have to be there, though. Probably Remus as well. He's the one brewing it.
Regulus grimaces.
I can brew it.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work for them.
He'd assumed as much.
Fine, but you ask. And it's only the one question. And I get to hear it before I take the potion. Understood?
Yeah, Reg. Okay. I won't let anything happen that you don't want. You know that, right?
Those big eyes. Infuriatingly bright. And kind. Regulus nods. That helps. Doesn't fix anything. But it helps.
When?
Tomorrow?
His stomach squirms, but really, better to get this over with sooner rather than later. You could say no, offers the voice in his head. You can make good on your threat. The problem is, it's hard to want to, staring at James. Weak, the voice hisses. Yeah, he thinks. I am.
Is that okay?
James ducks his head, trying to get Regulus's attention. Regulus blinks, realizing he's just been standing there silently.
Fine.
The fire crackles behind them, casting shadows over the bed across the room. It feels uncomfortable to look at right now, like it doesn't belong here, in this moment. This is usually such a happy space.
Are we done now?
James looks up.
Done?
Fighting.
James holds his hand out. After a few seconds, Regulus finds himself taking it, being pulled into James. Just the way he wanted, though he'd never admit it. He burrows his face into the crux of the other boy's neck.
Yeah, Reg.
James's hand traces circles onto his back.
We're done fighting.
It feels good, even if Regulus knows it isn't true. They don't really talk much after that. Eventually, James slides down onto the sofa, bringing Regulus with him, holding him too tight. It feels like denial, like licking wounds they can't heal. Still, Regulus doesn't pull away. Not for a long time. When he finally makes his way down the passage to the Slytherin common room, it's late. Close to 2 a.m, he imagines. He feels worn out by the day, by the cauldron of emotions bubbling in his chest, by all the things he can't do. Maybe if any of those things had been different, he would have noticed sooner. The unnatural quiet, the familiar buzzing of a muffliato charm. But he doesn't notice anything until he gets to the door of his dorm and finds it locked. He looks down at the handle in his hands, trying to twist it again with no luck. He briefly considers going back to the common room and just sleeping on one of the sofas. He hasn't got the energy for whatever the hell those idiots are doing in there. But after a few minutes of deliberating, he pulls out his wand.
Alohomora.
He slides his wand back up his sleeve and pushes forward. The first thing that hits him is the noise. The second thing he notices are the people. He blinks, adjusting to the dark lighting. Mulciber and Snape are sitting on his bed. Girls Regulus doesn't recognise dancing in front of them. The curtains around Barty's bed have been drawn, and Evan...
Reg!
There's a cup in one of his hands, and the other is slinging around Regulus's shoulders, pulling him further into the room. Regulus can smell the alcohol on his breath.
Evan, what the hell is going on?
He spots Avery in the corner, a girl on his lap, her back to Regulus.
Oh. Well, Severus over there.
Evan gestures to the miserable twat with his drink.
I actually had a good idea for once.
I highly doubt that. Is this a party? Are you throwing a party in the middle of the week in our dorm room? With Snape of all people?
No, listen.
He thumps Regulus too hard in the chest, knocking the wind out of him.
Oh, sorry about that. But no, not the party. Not just the party anyway. See, after Macdonald's lit a display in the corridor, Snape decided that the Mudblood girls needed to be knelt down a few pegs, reminded of who's fucking in charge around here. Who their betters are, so to speak.
Evan waggles his eyebrows in a thoroughly unsettling way. Regulus still feels lost.
You wanted to put them in their place?
He gets a nod of approval from Evan.
So you invited them back to your room for a drink?
Evan grips Regulus's shoulder.
No invites.
He brings his face uncomfortably close to Regulus's.
We don't need to ask Mudbloods for shit. We can just take it.
Regulus stares at him, feeling an uncomfortable scratching against his ribs as he takes in the room again. Takes in the vacant look on the girls' faces.
Evan, what did you do?
Imperia. Surprisingly, Barty is very good at it.
He leans back, taking a sip of his drink. Regulus steps away, a wave of nausea crashing into him. He remembers being in the kitchen, remembers Bellatrix's voice in his head. Vomit crawls up the back of his throat and he collides with the wall behind him, skin covered in sweat, everything too hot.
Hey, whoa, Reg!
Evan's voice gets closer and Regulus cringes away.
Don't.
Regulus stops Evan's hand mid-air as he reaches for him. Regulus shakes his head.
Don't touch me.
Evan looks genuinely frightened.
Shit. You don't look good. Are you okay?
Regulus swallows, trying to figure out a way to answer that question when his eyes fall on Barty's bed again. Curtains drawn.
Evan, what's Barty doing?
What?
He turns back to Regulus, his smile slightly less confident.
He got married.
He'd been 13. Lucius had said, "You like it. Trust me. Don't you trust me, Reggie?" And he had. Of course he had. He'd been 13. They're everywhere. The girls with the dead eyes. And suddenly they look just like him.
Regulus.
Stop it. Stop this. They need to leave.
His back is pressed against the wall, but it's not enough. Like the thick air of the room has grown hands and he can feel it. Feel them on his skin, in his head.
Hey, look, it's okay, alright?
Evan's hands are held up like he's trying to calm a startled animal.
It's not like they'll remember it anyway.
Don't you trust me, Reggie? Regulus's nails start digging into the stone.
They'll remember.
What?
Regulus forces his eyes open, not realizing he had closed them in the first place.
Evan, please. I'm asking. Please. Please get them out.
There's a pause. A few seconds. A few minutes. Regulus doesn't know, but in the end, Evan nods.
Okay.
And as easy as that, he whips out his wand, spelling off the music, upping the lights, turning to face the room at large.
Show's over, folks. Let's clear out. Send the witches on the way.
Are you kidding me?
Avery shoves the girl off his lap so that he can look at Evan properly. The girl doesn't react, her expression remaining blank. Regulus has to look away.
Getting cold feet, Rosier.
Snape's eyes are on Regulus. Evan just grins at him.
Getting bored more like. Now, if you don't mind, you can get the fuck out of my room.
What about Crouch?
Mulciber jabs a hand towards Barty's bed.
What about him? You didn't know that he lives here, right?
Mulciber scowls.
So what? He gets to carry on while the rest of us get blue balls?
Evan gives him a flat look, but Regulus can tell he's thinking about how difficult Barty is going to make this. Eventually, he turns to the bed in question.
Barty.
Don't you fucking dare, Evan.
Come on, Barty. Get out here. It's over.
There's a pause before the curtains whip back so violently Regulus is surprised that they don't come off their tracks. Barty is shirtless, but his trousers are still on. That's something, isn't it? Regulus sags a little more into the wall. There's thunder in the look Barty throws at Evan.
You're joking. Tell me you're joking, because I swear if you don't start laughing...
No.
Snape slides off Regulus's bed. He'll have to get the house elves to wash the sheets, and comes to lean against the chest at the foot of it.
Don't be too hard on poor old Rosier. He's just doing what he's told. Isn't that right, Black?
Yeah. I want you the fuck out of my room.
All right, fair enough. But surely you won't have a problem with your friend carrying on.
I have a problem with it.
Snape takes another step close to him and Regulus feels alarm bells go off inside his head. Too close, too close, too close. But he swallows that fear, however much it hurts going down.
Regulus?
But Regulus doesn't take his eyes off of Snape.
Yeah, I have a problem with it.
Snape's smile grows.
But why?
He takes another step closer and Regulus wonders if he knows what he's doing. There's something cruel in Snape's eyes. Something cold. He has a vision of a hallway. Roger Flint crowding him into a wall. And Snape. Snape standing there. Of course this had been his idea.
I don't have to explain myself to you. Now get out and take them with you.
He motions to the blank-faced girls.
Reg, what the fuck?
Barty is halfway out of his bed when a foot comes from behind and kicks him in the back, sending him catapulting onto the floor. Almost immediately, a half-dressed Mary McDonald follows, clear-eyed and on a war path. Regulus curses under his breath. This is the last thing they need.
Don't let the bitch out!
Barty struggles to get up from the floor. Mulciber is the first one to move, throwing his body in her path.
You want a kiss, MacDonald?
Mulciber asks as he grabs her by the arms, pinning them to his sides.
Don't fucking touch me.
She knees him in the groin and he instantly drops her, doubling over in pain, but Barty is on his feet now and he grabs her by the hair before she can get far, yanking her backwards with too much force. She goes careening towards the floor, Barty noticing too late that she won't be able to catch herself. A split second later, Mary McDonald's head hits the stone. The room goes still. They wait for her to get up. She doesn't.
Fuck. Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. My dad's going to kill me.
Regulus spares him a glance before he looks back at Mary. Her eyes closed, hair definitely darker near the scalp. He steps forward, carefully kneeling down on the ground and hovering his ear above her chest.
She's breathing.
Fuck, that's worse.
Barty starts to pace. Evan crouches down beside him.
She's bleeding pretty bad.
Yeah.
He's going to give me the Dementor's kiss.
Barty, who wanted to do something, to prove himself so badly. Regulus gently prods at her head, trying to get a sense of how bad the damage is while running through every healing spell he knows. There aren't many. After a moment, he pulls out his wand.
Reparables.
Evan wrinkles his nose.
What was that?
Stamina spell.
Regulus turns her head gently to the side to inspect the wound. There's still a gash, bleeding less profusely now, but not healed. He pulls his hands back. They're covered in blood. It's on his wand.
So is that it? Is she good now?
Avery peers over Evan's shoulder. Regulus sends him an irritated look.
No. She needs to go to the infirmary.
That seems to garner a reaction out of everyone. Barty sits down on his bed and drops his head into his hands.
He's going to kill me.
Mulciber and Snape decide to take a more verbal approach.
We can't take her to the hospital wing. They'll find us out.
It does seem rather reckless, Black.
This whole thing was reckless. Can you perform a memory charm?
There's a pause before the other boy nods.
Good. Make sure they don't remember anything and then get them back to their dorms.
He gestures to the girls.
And get the fuck out of my sight.
Snape's dark eyes run him up and down.
And you're in charge, are you?
He considers hexing him, but honestly, they haven't got the time.
Yeah.
He pushes his sleeve back, bearing his mark for the first time since he got it.
Yeah. I'm in charge.
Holy shit!
Both Avery and Mulciber crowd round him. He watches Snape take it in. Watches him swallow his pride with a bitter look on his face, eyes flicking back up to Regulus's.
Well, who would have thought you had it in you?
Regulus doesn't answer, just stares him down. Eventually Snape concedes.
Grab the girls. Bring them back to our room.
Hey!
Regulus stops him, Snape shooting him a look halfway out the door.
They get back to their dorms.
Of course.
None of the other girls seem to have broken free of the spell's hold. Regulus isn't sure if it's because Mary McDonald is exceptionally strong, or Barty's spell was just exceptionally weak. It could go either way. Regardless, Avery and Mulciber herd the others out without much fuss, leaving the room a silent mess.
I'm so dead. I'm so dead.
Barty looks as though he's trying to pull his hair out.
He's going to let them suck out my soul. He's going to watch them do it.
Regulus looks down at Mary, eyes still closed, head still bleeding.
What's the plan, Captain?
There's really only one option at this point.
I'll bring her to the hospital wing.
Evan arches his brow in question, but Regulus only shrugs.
I already have the mark, right?
He bends down to pick her up, but stops halfway.
Get me her shirt.
What?
Regulus looks sharply at Barty.
Get me her shirt.
Barty looks somewhere between confused and angry, but he doesn't argue, reaching across his bed and coming back with a black t-shirt. Regulus is clumsy getting it on her, but he feels better once he does. Not that it changes anything. He slips one arm under her legs and the other under her head, struggling to straighten up.
Disillusion us, would you?
Evan nods, instantly obliging.
Right. I'll see you in a bit.
Do you want me to come with you?
Evan stares somewhere over Regulus's head.
No. It'll be easier alone.
Evan nods and Regulus turns for the door, the smell of blood already overwhelming his senses.
Regulus.
He pauses.
Yeah?
Barty fidgets, hair sticking out in all directions from the pulling, his face frightfully pale.
Thank you.
But Regulus doesn't respond, channeling his anger into a single look his friend will never see before pushing out the door and into the hallway beyond. It's the middle of the night now, so the hallways are fairly easy to navigate even while carrying an unconscious body. Still, by the time he gets to the hospital wing, he's exhausted, breathing heavily as he lowers her carefully onto the floor, leaning her against the wall. He wipes the sweaty palms on his trousers before pulling out his wand, casting a silencing charm around them and then pointing at Mary.
Renovate.
Her eyes fly open, arms flying out as though she expects to find herself falling.
Shh. It's okay. You're all right.
She looks like she's about to speak.
Fuck, my head.
Her hand goes to grab it, but instantly flies out again.
Oh my god, am I bleeding?
Mary, I need you to focus, okay?
He takes hold of her shoulders. She's shaking under his hands.
Can you focus for me?
She blinks several times, wincing.
Regulus?
Yes. I need you to tell me who did this to you. Do you remember?
It hurts. Fuck my head.
I know.
And he does. She shouldn't be conscious right now, but he just needs to get through this.
Just tell me what you remember, and then I can get you some pain potion, okay?
He can see her struggling through it.
Yeah.
But her face seems to implode in on itself.
Sorry, it's just...
It's okay. I just need you to tell me if you remember who did this to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Crouch. It was Barty fucking Crouch.
Regulus does his best not to grimace, wand still in his hand.
Right. Okay. That was really good, Mary.
Her eyes squeezed shut, teeth chattering from the pain.
Can I get that potion now?
Yeah, of course.
He lifts his wand.
I'm sorry.
What?
Obliviate.
Her face goes blank, all the tension from the pain and fear dropping away. Regulus lifts his wand again.
I really am sorry. Legilimens.
The thing is, they're going to ask her questions. Pomfrey, McGonagall, Dumbledore even. A student shows up to the hospital wing unconscious and brutalized. This doesn't just go away, and a blank memory is almost as dangerous as a fully intact one. So he needs to replace it. For once in his life, being his mother's son actually comes in handy. He's seen Wahlberger mess with enough people's heads, mess with his own, that he's picked up a few tricks. He forces his way into her head. She's weak, and doesn't seem to know occlumency, so it isn't hard. Her memories fluttering around him like he's standing in a room full of butterflies, snippets of voices and faces coming in and out of focus. It's always best to build on something real, so he focuses on her most recent memories, pulling them before him. It takes a heroic amount of mental energy to control someone else's thoughts, and he knows he won't be able to maintain this for long. He needs to act fast. Everything is a bit distorted because of the Imperio. The moments in the dorm room few and far between. Most of the night is just black. Regulus wonders if that's because she was slowly pushing back against the curse. If the moments of blurry memory are her coming back to the surface. He's obliviated the last hour or so, meaning she has no memory of coming fully back to herself, of fighting with Barty or Mulciber, but there is the memory of her getting cursed. Regulus grabs hold of it, watching as Barty walks towards her.
Hey, Macdonald!
Get lost, creep.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Listen, I came to apologize.
Yeah, sure you did.
In the background, Regulus, and more importantly, Mary, can see Snape, Mulciber, and Avery. He doesn't know where Evan is, but that's all for the better. Using every ounce of control he has, Regulus freezes the memory. He surveys the faces in the background, thinking. It would be so incredibly satisfying to frame Snape, but he's too clever. He'd figure out what was happening. Find a way out. Hell, maybe even find a way to turn it around on Regulus. No. He needs someone stupid enough not to realize what's happening until it's too late. Or even better, someone stupid enough to want to take credit for this. Like wading through water, he pushes through Mary's memory, grabbing hold of Mulciber and moving him into Barty's spot, covering the first boy completely, dispersing him like smoke. The image before Regulus flickers, but he holds it tight, refusing to let go of the reins.
Hey, MacDonald.
Mulciber walks towards her.
Get lost, creep.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Listen, I came to apologize.
Yeah, sure you did.
Regulus watches the whole thing play out again. Watches Mulciber move further and further into Mary's space. Watches him pull out his wand. Watches him imperio her. Watches Mary's memory shake and blur and fade to black. The voice isn't quite right. Still a bit too high for Mulciber, but there's nothing he can do about that. He hasn't the time or the skill to fix it. Taking a deep breath, he pulls back, catching himself on his hands and knees as the corridor reforms around him. He blinks the spots out of his vision, breathing heavy as he turns to find Mary slumped against the wall, eyes closed again. He checks her pulse just to be certain she's still okay, and then gets to his feet. The world spins for a moment and he worries that he's going to pass out, but somehow he manages to keep hold of his consciousness. After a few more seconds, he turns his wand on himself and casts a new disillusionment charm, the old one having faded. Then he knocks on the hospital wing door and starts walking away. He's nearly at the end of the hall when he hears the door open.
This better be important if... Oh, sweetheart. What's happened to you?
Regulus doesn't stop. Doesn't turn around, even as the sound of Madame Pomfrey's voice trembles through him, the blood on his hands suddenly burning hot. He wonders if he'll ever get the stains out. The friendship of Lily Evans and Mary Macdonald began under a bed. Lily's bed, to be exact. See, she'd been having a bad day. It was first year, and everything was just a little much. She missed her mum and dad. Back then, she even missed Petunia. And Severus was there, but he wasn't there. He was in Slytherin. After the sorting, Lily had briefly considered begging the Hat to put her in Slytherin too. Especially after being placed in the same house as Black and Potter. There hadn't been any posh kids at her old school, but they were about as obnoxious and self-obsessed as she had expected, and Potter was so gaga for Gryffindor that she was certain it would be filled with people just like him. In the end, however, Lily had not had the guts to ask anything of the Sorting Hat, so she had remained in Gryffindor. And mostly that had been okay. Posh, bespectacled brats aside. Her roommates were nice, her classes were fun, and she did rather like not living in a dungeon. But she was also lonely, and out of place, and uncomfortable. There were so many things that the kids around her, even if they weren't purebloods, seemed to know, and it felt impossible trying to keep up with it all. Severus did his best to help her along, but she could tell that he was sometimes a little bit embarrassed by her. That was the worst feeling, honestly. One afternoon at the end of September, for no reason in particular, it had all just felt too much. So she crawled under her bed, trying to make the world smaller, easier to manage. About 15 minutes into her pity party, Mary had walked in. Lily watched her feet, listened to the David Bowie song she hummed under her breath. Her and Mary had barely exchanged more than a few sentences, but she was secretly Lily's favourite roommate, if only because she was the one who reminded Lily the most of home. The posters she hung up on the walls were all the people Lily recognised, and they didn't move or talk. Plus, sometimes, she would complain about things that Lily could relate to, like missing ballpoint pens and 3-ringed binders. She's not sure, to this day, what compelled her to speak then. Surely the smart thing to do would have been to remain silent and hope that her new roommate wouldn't notice her having a complete and utter mental breakdown. But being quiet had never been Lily's strong suit.
Do you have records?
Ah!
Her feet stumbled back into her bed.
Ugh! Jesus Christ! Lily? Is that you?
It's just that I've never seen you play any, but you hum them all the time.
Where the hell are you?
At home, I have a bunch of records, but my mum wouldn't let me bring them. She didn't know how safe it would be here, and she was worried they'd get stolen. Not that wizards are dying for muggle music, but, of course, she didn't know that. Still doesn't, I suppose.
Lily, did you get turned invisible or something?
What? Oh.
Lily blinked.
No, I'm not invisible.
Then why the hell can I hear you prattling on, but there's not a single freckle in my line of vision?
Lily scowled up at the bottom of her bed.
I don't have that many freckles.
Uh-huh. And the giant squid doesn't have that many legs.
Did you just...
Where are you?
To be honest, Lily quite liked being a disembodied voice. It was freeing.
I'm under here.
Under what? Oh. Honestly.
A few moments later, Mary was kneeling on the floor and peering at Lily under the bed. What the hell are you doing, is what Lily expected her to say. If it had been Petunia, freak might even have been thrown in there somewhere. But the thing about Mary, the beautiful, fantastic, brilliant thing about Mary, was that she never did what you were expecting.
I see.
She slid under the bed to lie right alongside Lily.
What's happened then? You and your boyfriend have a fight?
Boyfriend? Oh, no. Sev isn't... We aren't... We're just friends.
Her face blushed so furiously it burned. Mary turned her head to look at Lily, brow arched.
Really?
Then you two might want to stop making googly eyes at one another all the time.
We don't do that.
You do.
Don't.
Do.
Don't.
Do.
Don't infinity.
Mary rolled her eyes.
Whatever. So if that's not what you wanted to hear, what is?
Lily chewed on her lip, looking back up at the bottom of her bed.
I just think... I don't know. That someone made a mistake?
Probably, but you'll have to be more specific.
At 11, Mary's dry sense of humour was largely lost on Lily. Mary would later credit her wit to her childhood obsession with Monty Python.
I just don't think I'm supposed to be a witch.
Lily didn't have to turn her head to know that Mary was staring at her.
What do you mean supposed to be? You are a witch.
But I'm not really though, am I? I'm a muggle.
That is literally not true.
Yes, but I know muggle things, and I like muggle things. And I don't know anything about wizards, really. People like Marlene, or Alice, or God, even James Bloody Potter. Those people are meant to be wizards and witches. It's in their blood. It comes to them so naturally. None of this is natural to me.
Mary continued to stare at her for long enough that Lily started to squirm. She had rather been hoping that out of everyone, Mary would understand.
Did you know that the Gryffindor Quidditch team is almost always half-bloods and purebloods?
Lily blinked, adjusting to this change in topic.
No, I didn't.
Mary nodded.
And even when there are Muggle-borns, they're always 7th years, because it takes them that long to pick up the game. Not me, though. I'm going to get it in 3. I'm going to be the youngest Muggle-born Quidditch player ever on the Gryffindor team, and you know why?
Lily shook her head and Mary inched a little closer.
To piss them the fuck off.
At that time, swearing was still rather new to Lily and caused several moments of shocked silence.
Them?
Mary waved her hands above her as much as the bed would allow.
The powers that be, the system, the man, the snooty purebloods, because I am every bit as much as a witch as they are.
Mary's eyes locked onto Lily's.
And so are you.
After that, they'd gone to the Great Hall and only eaten dessert for dinner, and eventually Marlene had joined them, and Lily had felt better, and by Christmas she didn't want to leave. But that moment under the bed, the moment her and Mary really became friends, had always stuck with her, always made her smile a little. Made her feel better when someone in her class laughed at some bit of magic she didn't know. Something that was obvious, that little kid learned. I am every bit as much a witch as you are, she'd think, channeling Mary as best she could. Because Mary never apologised for herself, never felt embarrassed, never backed down from a fight. She was unstoppable. The bruises take time to show up. When they do, Lily waves them away with the flick of her wand. They're blue and yellow, on Mary's wrists, her neck, her jaw. They look like flower petals, like fingerprints. Mary hasn't opened her eyes yet, at least not since Marlene and Lily have been here. Apparently she talked to McGonagall and Dumbledore, but they hadn't been allowed in then. By the time they had, Mary had been given a sleeping potion. That was a few hours ago. Marlene is sitting in the chair next to her. She hasn't spoken all day, her eyes intent on Mary's face.
Pomfrey wouldn't tell them what happened.
But she would tell them that Mary has had a blow to the back of the head. A bad one. She'll have a concussion, but there are potions for that. Any more severe brain damage and they'll have to send her to St. Mungo's, but it's hard to tell at this point if that'll happen because she hasn't been awake long enough to know. Despite all of those horrible details, it's still the bruises that Lily can't stop thinking about.
Someone did this. They did it on purpose. They did it with their bare hands.
Who, though? That causes Lily to jump. Apparently she said that last bit out loud. She looks over at Marlene and after a second she shrugs.
It'd have to be a Slytherin. Older years. My guess is the boys. None of the girls could take her in a fight.
Nor could they leave fingerprints embedded in her skin. Marlene's face scrunches, eyes still on Mary.
But why?
That question takes Lily by surprise. A reminder of the difference between Marlene's life and her own, and Mary's.
Because she's a mudblood.
Marlene's eyes go wide.
You think this was about blood status?
Of course, she wants to say. Obviously. Except it's clear that this is not the obvious conclusion for Marlene.
They've been getting bolder, shouting at us in the halls, jinxing us, and Mary's...
Not likely to walk away from a fight.
Fuck.
Marlene drops her head into her hands, staying like that for a few minutes before she speaks again.
Did the teachers know?
That is a question Lily asks herself frequently.
They know, but sometimes I think they don't quite believe us. Or they think it's as simple as house rivalries.
Her eyes trail back to Mary.
Maybe they'll take us more seriously now.
Ah, I didn't realize.
Marlene drops her hands, looking up.
I knew they were pricks sometimes, but I didn't realize it had gotten this bad.
To be fair to Marlene, Lily isn't entirely sure she realized it had gotten this bad either. She certainly hadn't considered the possibility of one of them being attacked like this, at Hogwarts. It crossed the line somehow. Kids were cruel. They name-called and teased. Lily was no stranger to it. She got it for her hair back home. For a while, Mudblood hadn't felt that much different. But this? Mary starts to stir, turning her head from one side to the other. Instantly, Marlene and Lily are on their feet.
Mary?
Marlene takes their friend's hand and squeezes. It's odd to see Mary like this. Small. There's something about her that fills up every room. She's colourful and loud and abrasive and a pain in the ass, but never small, never fragile. Not until now. Mary's eyes blink open, bloodshot and momentarily terrified. She jolts upright and then instantly grabs her head.
Jesus, fuck, that hurts.
Her voice is somehow incredibly comforting. Apparently Marlene thinks so too because she starts frantically wiping the tears from her eyes. Lily reaches out and squeezes her arm. After a few seconds, Mary's face relaxes, hands dropping from her head as she looks at them properly. Her eyes go from Marlene to Lily, and back again.
Ma...
I'm sorry. Shit, I'm sorry. It's just really good to hear your voice.
Marlene is so busy trying to keep the tears off her cheeks that she misses the soft look in Mary's eyes.
Okay, enough. Jesus, I'm not dead.
When Marlene's eyes come up, they're fierce.
Don't joke about that. Not right now. Not when...
She doesn't say you could have been, but judging by the new tension that falls around them, they're all thinking it anyway. She props her pillows up behind her and then carefully leans herself against it. It's clear that she's in pain.
If I'm gonna die young, it better be because I overdosed at an orgy or something, not because some twats imperioused me while I wasn't looking.
Hey, what?
Marlene's eyes grow to about twice their normal size.
They used an unforgivable.
Mary's eyes travel between the pair of them.
Pomfrey didn't tell you anything?
They shake their heads.
She told us that you split the back of your skull open. That's about it.
Lily doesn't mention the bruises.
Boy, did I ever.
She brings her hand back to her head.
I swear if these headaches don't quit it, I'm gonna start breaking things.
Do you want me to go get Pomfrey?
Mary waves her off.
Not yet, she'll only put me to sleep again.
She pinches the bridge of her nose.
What time is it?
Supper. 6:30, about.
Mary nods and then winces.
The day?
Lily and Marlene exchange a quick glance.
Thursday.
You reckon Slughorn will give me a pass on that potions paper?
Yeah. I think he'll probably let it slide this time.
Sweet.
Mary drops her hand again.
You're sure you don't want me to get Pomfrey?
I just want to not be out of my head for a few more minutes.
Bit by bit, Lily thinks she can see Mary growing paler. It's clear that the longer she's conscious, the more she hurts.
The boys were here, by the way.
Mary opens her eyes.
The boys?
James, Sirius, Remus, Pete. Came as soon as they heard, sat in the hallway waiting with us, but Pomfrey would only let in 2 visitors.
Mary smirks.
Nothing like a head injury to make a girl popular.
There's a pause, none of them quite knowing what to say. It goes on for too long before Marlene finally breaks.
Mary? What the hell happened?
Ah, well.
Mary smiles in a cold kind of way, sending shivers down Lily's arms.
Isn't that the 1,000-galleon question?
You don't remember?
Mary shrugs, wincing again.
Bits and pieces. Pomfrey says it'll get better with time.
You know you were Imperiist.
Yeah. Her eyes flick down and she suddenly becomes very interested in smoothing out the wrinkles in her bed sheets.
I know that.
Lily can't quite imagine it. The idea, the concept itself, is terrifying. To have someone gain complete control of you. To have the power to make you do whatever they wanted. It makes her skin crawl.
Do you know who?
Marlene reaches out to take her hand again, squeezing. Mary scrunches her face.
Sometimes.
Marlene and Lily exchange another look, and when Mary doesn't continue, Lily prods her.
Sometimes?
Like I said, it's all bits and pieces.
She pulls her mouth to the side, still staring down at the bed.
Gets all stretched out. You see a face and then it disappears, and sometimes there are bodies without faces at all, sometimes the faces switch bodies.
Marlene looks about as terrified as Lily feels. Mary's words have an itching quality to them. They creep along the floor. They grab at your legs, crawl up your spine.
Do you know the faces?
It feels a bit like Mary isn't quite there. Something distant about her eyes. It reminds Lily of the school ghosts.
Mulciber.
Her hands are curling in the sheets.
It was Mulciber. At least, it's usually Mulciber.
Lily has no idea what to do with the end of that sentence. Mary is starting to get frighteningly pale.
What the fuck? You told McGonagall, right? Dumbledore? What are they going to do?
No idea, didn't tell me.
What can they do? Expel him?
Expel? For an unforgivable? They better be calling the fucking ministry in.
Ma.
Her free hand comes up to massage her temple.
I appreciate the righteous indignation, but maybe a little less screechy.
Marlene's cheeks flush.
Sorry.
Lily is about to suggest that they really ought to get Pomfrey now, since Mary is looking ready to keel over, but Marlene cuts her off.
Weird that it was Mulciber. When was the last time you even talked to him?
No idea.
Was he alone?
Lily thinks she sees Mary tense. She definitely sees Mary's eyes flick up to meet hers before dropping back to the bed.
I don't know, it's not very clear.
But that doesn't sit well with Lily.
Mary.
She brings her friend's gaze back to her, and she can see it. See it right there in the whites of her eyes. Lily feels her heart sink.
Tell me.
Because she doesn't want to have to wonder, to guess. She just wants to know. To hear it and face it.
Avery was there, I'm pretty sure.
Lily knows what's coming. Really she does. Knows it by the worry on Mary's face and the reluctant way she drags her words. But even knowing, she somehow still isn't ready.
And Snape.
It's a bit like getting punched in the stomach. That sentence. A bit like having your heart broken. A bit like falling off your broom. It's so hard to explain to people, but she really had loved him. Loved him most of her life. Loved him still. Maybe that's one of those things that never stops. Can't be undone. She wonders how many times someone has to let you down before you don't get back up again.
Excuse me.
She's shaking as she turns on her heels and starts for the door.
Lily?
Get Pomfrey. She needs a bloody pain potion.
She doesn't hear Marlene's response, already pushing through the door. He'll be in the Great Hall for dinner. Most of the school will be there, in fact. Lily doesn't really care, hands and fists at her sides as she cuts across the castle. She doesn't have a plan, just a storm of rage inside her that demands an outlet. That's been growing since she first saw her friend lying broken in that bed.
Lily!
She doesn't look at the voice that calls out to her, eyes scanning the Slytherin table until they land on one particular black-haired head. Severus doesn't see her coming until she's practically on top of him.
Lily.
Up.
His brows draw together.
Lily, what?
Get up. Now.
Still looking thoroughly confused, he does as she asks, standing far too close to her.
What's happened?
Because of course he can't have anyone overhearing him being decent. which only infuriates her more because he knows what's happened. And for a moment she feels frozen with all the anger coursing through her.
Lily.
He reaches out and touches her arm. She's surprised, honestly, that he would be so bold in front of his friends.
Let's go somewhere, okay? Let's talk.
But she doesn't want to talk. Childishly, she shoves him hard in the chest, and it's probably because he isn't expecting it that he falls back, ass slamming into the floor, barely able to catch himself on his hands.
Merlin, what the hell?
It doesn't make a difference. That's what you said. Do you remember?
He blinks up at her, eyes darting nervously to the table beside them. Feels like the whole hall is watching them now.
No. Of course you don't. Let me remind you. I asked you if it mattered, being Muggle-born, and you said no.
His eyes come back to hers, dark and pleading. How did we get here? How?
Was it a lie then? Or was it only later? Did you hate me always? Was any of it real?
His face pales and he shakes his head furiously as he forgets about their audience, about his friends.
I don't hate you. You know that. You have to know that. I told you.
You told me it doesn't make a difference.
That shuts him up, sucks the words right back down his throat.
We're the same. Me and Mary. Don't you see that?
She's shaking terribly.
Everything you think about her, that you say about her, that you do to her, you do it to me too.
No.
She shakes her head.
I know you, Sev. I know you think that doing this makes you strong. Makes up for all the time you spent in that house afraid, unable to help her.
Severus has gone stock still on the floor of the Great Hall. He's always hated talking about his family. Usually Lily lets him avoid the subject, though for a long time it killed her, standing idly by while he was hurt, over and over again. Okay. Maybe it still kills her.
I wish you could see.
The whole world disappears, just as it always used to when it was only the two of them.
That this makes you just like him.
He physically flinches.
Lily.
You're a coward, Severus. What you did to me. What you did to Mary. You're a coward.
She steps forward, leaning closer to him.
I hope you fucking choke.
You can hate someone and love someone at the same time, Lily has learned. First with her sister, now with Severus. Christ, she thinks as she pulls back. You used to be my home.
Miss Evans!
Lily turns to face McGonagall. The older woman has walked out from behind the teacher's table, nearly meeting Lily where she stands.
My office. Now.
Lily doesn't fight it. How could she? Doesn't regret it either. Following McGonagall out of the room with her eyes very determinedly on the space in front of her and not the faces around her.
Sit.
When they get to her office, McGonagall closes the door behind them with a flick of her wand. Lily does as she's asked, sitting in the chair in front of the desk and watching as McGonagall takes the wand behind it. The ensuing silence makes Lily feel twitchy, the adrenaline pumping through her still demanding action. Eventually she cracks.
Look, Professor, I understand that what I did broke about a dozen rules, and I'm fully willing to accept any punishment you see fit. But I absolutely will not be apologizing to him.
McGonagall continues to watch her in silence for another moment before pushing something towards her across the desk. Tin?
Have a biscuit, Miss Evans.
Lily blinks, looking down at the shortbread being offered to her. Unsure what to do, she reaches forward and takes one.
Thank you.
Professor McGonagall smiles tightly.
If anyone asks, I gave you the dressing down of your life. You understand?
It takes Lily far too long to catch on to what's happening.
Oh.
McGonagall arches her brow.
Yes, I will, of course.
Good. I've always liked Mary McDonald.
She isn't sure if it makes her want to laugh or cry.
Yeah. Me too.
Regulus is on edge, but no one comes for him. He isn't called into any offices, isn't interrogated by any teachers, or aurors for that matter. The day actually starts out rather normal. The only signs that something is wrong are the missing faces from the Gryffindor table during breakfast. No Marlene Mckinnon, no Lily Evans. No James Potter, Sirius Black, or Peter Pettigrew. No Mary McDonald. As the day goes on, the rumours start to filter through the school. They're vague. Mary McDonald is in the infirmary. Someone's jealous girlfriend took revenge. No, actually, it was a Quidditch accident. She'd been drinking and fallen off the astronomy tower. She'd been outside after dark and gotten attacked by a werewolf. That one Regulus finds particularly funny because A, as if there could be a werewolf at Hogwarts that no one knew about, and B, last night was not a full moon. Regardless, with every reiteration the story gets further and further from the truth, and Regulus feels himself starting to relax. Maybe this whole thing will blow over? Then dinner happens. It's not that he doesn't enjoy watching Snape get his arse handed to him, he really does. The problem is that almost immediately after McGonagall drags Lily Evans away, the tone of the rumours starts to shift. Mary McDonald is in the infirmary because of Severus Snape, people start to whisper, which is not, by and large, a story that Regulus has a problem with, except that it's just close enough to the truth to bring back the pressure behind his ribs. It is at that moment, with his anxiety on the rise again, that Remus Lupin decides to show up.
Empty Charms classroom, 3rd floor, 15 minutes.
That's all he says before walking away. Regulus had been hoping they'd forget about the Veritaserum in the wake of Mary's attack, but apparently not. Which is just excellent, because obviously what he wants to be doing after altering someone's memory is be placed under Veritaserum in the presence of 3 angry hero complex-having Gryffindors. And yes, he trusts James to keep his promise, but he's also not an idiot. He knows Sirius won't stick to the agreement, knows he'll try to take advantage of the situation. It's just what he's like. But Regulus can't think of any other way to placate him, and, by extent, James. He berates himself as he marches down the hall towards the empty classroom. He knows better than to make threats he doesn't intend to follow through on, because this is the kind of situation you end up in when you do. But stupid Sirius had to be stupid standing there with his stupid boyfriend? Lover? Regulus pulls a face at the thought of his brother having a lover, and decides to drop that train of thought altogether. He can feel his hands shaking. He's nervous. Actually, more embarrassing than that, he's scared. He's been going over in his head the different ways he can get around any question Sirius might ask without lying. It's not possible to disobey the Veritaserum. Well, at least not if it's been made by any kind of competent potioneer. But it is possible to control it to some extent. It takes strength, though, and thoughtfulness. It also requires you to go slowly. If you get on a truth-telling roll, it can be hard to rein it back in again. Regulus's feet stutter outside the classroom door, and for a moment he considers just walking right by it. But he already has enough hanging over him right now. He doesn't need any more. With shaking, sweaty hands, he reaches for the door and pushes.
Finally, Merlin, did you fucking crawl here?
Sirius is lying on his back on the teacher's desk at the front of the class. Lupin in the chair beside him and James leaning against the wall.
Bit bold to be rude to the person in possession of the information you're so desperate to keep quiet.
Sirius sits up so fast Regulus is surprised he doesn't faint.
Is that another threat?
More like an accurate summary of the situation.
Sirius hops off the desk and strides towards him.
Listen here, you spoiled brat.
Pot, meat, kettle.
Sirius gives him a shove.
We are not the same.
A cold smirk pulls at the corner of Regulus's mouth.
Aren't we, though?
The rage that inspires in his older brother is something to behold. Eyes going dark, cheeks flushing red. Sirius reaches for something. His wand, maybe. But Lupin pulls him back, just like he did in the corridor.
Enough.
Sirius is glaring, so Regulus makes sure to flash him his most unpleasant smile. He's pretty sure he picked it up from Walburga.
Let's get this over with, shall we?
James pushes himself off the wall. Regulus looks at him briefly and then away. It's harder to keep his mask on when James is around. James kicks out a chair and then gestures to it. Regulus notes that he's not making much eye contact either. With a confidence that he does not feel, Regulus strides forward and sits, watching as Lupin passes James the potion. His pulse starts to speed up again. James is many things. A good actor is not one of them. There's worry in his eyes when he turns to Regulus. A question. Because James always asks. Always. And Regulus can tell that it's killing him that he can't now. Not really. Regulus can't imagine how they convince Sirius that James should be the one to do this. No doubt he's already suspicious of something, even if it isn't close to the truth. and as Regulus stares at the vial in James's hands, all he can think is, please not the mark. Ask me anything else, but don't ask me about the mark. I'm not ready to lose him. Not yet. Just let me have him for a little longer. Just let me pretend for a little longer. Eventually James holds out the potion and Regulus takes it, hoping it's not obvious that his hands are shaking. He turns it over a few times before looking back up. He focuses on James. It helps.
What's the question?
You know what the question is.
But Regulus doesn't look away from James.
Do you, Regulus Black, intend to expose in any way the nature of the relationship between Sirius Black, your brother, and Remus Lupin to anyone?
Regulus stares at him, and then, because he can't help it, because Sirius brings out all the nasty, childish parts of him.
But what kind of relationship could they possibly have? Sirius isn't gay after all.
He gets the reaction he wants. Lupin flinches and Sirius fumes.
Fuck you, Reg.
Yeah, fuck you right back.
Okay, Merlin.
James steps forward, hand running through his hair as he sends Sirius a look that means something along the lines of stand down. After a few seconds he turns back to Regulus. It's unnerving how much this hurts. Being so close but not being allowed to know him, to touch him. It hurts more every time they do it. Weak, the familiar voice in his head sneers. Every day it sounds more and more like his mother. I am, he thinks. I am.
That's okay with you?
Regulus blinks.
What?
The question.
Oh.
Regulus shakes himself.
Yes, that's fine.
James nods, followed by a moment of silence, and Regulus realizes they're all waiting for him to drink now. He looks down at the glass vial in his hands and fights the urge to smash it on the floor. This is his fault. He knows that. His miscalculation. His optimism that he would be strong enough to set this thing between him and James on fire. But he isn't. Not yet. Weak. He pulls out the stopper and tips the potion into his mouth in one swift motion. If he thinks about it, he knows he won't be able to do it. Better to have it over with fast. He swallows and licks his lips while looking at Lupin.
Lemon?
There's only the shortest of pauses before Lupin nods.
It came through then?
Yeah. Covers the aftertaste. And smart. Most people try to make potions sweet, but the lemon won't interfere with the dandelion root.
Yes, exactly.
Lupin seems to almost forget that they don't like one another, and Regulus wonders if this is the potion at work already. If he would have complimented Lupin without it. He thinks he would have, but the uncertainty adds a new level to the anxiety already bubbling inside him. James turns to Lupin.
How long until it kicks in?
Lupin shrugs.
Depends on the person, but should be any time now.
James opens his mouth, but Sirius beats him to it.
I want to be sure. Before you ask it, I want to be sure the potion is working.
James grimaces.
And how do you propose we do that?
Sirius looks at Regulus, who feels his pulse speed up to what must be an unhealthy level. But James holds his hand out before Sirius can speak.
You ask me. If he agrees to answer, I'll ask him.
A loophole. Regulus is grateful. If Sirius finds this suspicious, he doesn't show it. But Regulus supposes that James, being a self-righteous asshole, is probably par for the course.
Okay.
His eyes are still on Regulus.
Ask him what his teddy bear was called when we were kids.
Regulus feels his whole body collapse backwards against his chair. That is a question he can answer. James still turns to him, eyebrow raised, and Regulus nods. Screw embarrassment. He'll take that over heartbreak any day.
Regulus, what was the name of your teddy bear when you were a kid?
He feels it instantly. The tug in his chest, the words ripped out of his head.
Cuddletons.
Cuddletons?
Sir Cuddletons III, if you want to be formal.
Regulus stares flatly at James, who is clearly fighting back a laugh.
Children have given stuffed animals more ridiculous names.
Have they?
And then, seeming to remember that his friends are in the room with them, James looks at Sirius.
Yeah, that's it.
Sirius nods. James turns back to Regulus.
Ready?
He nearly rolls his eyes.
Yes, please. Let's get this over with.
James holds his stare like he's holding his hand, and Regulus wonders if the other two can see it.
Do you, Regulus Black, intend to expose in any way the nature of the relationship between Sirius Black, your brother, and Remus Lupin to anyone?
Regulus doesn't waver, feeling the tug again and not trying to fight it.
No.
Great.
James gives him a tight smile, clapping his hands together and turning to his friends.
Well, that was rather anticlimactic, but I think we're done.
Does he really ask about me?
Sirius looks right at Regulus, who blinks back at him.
Oh, yeah.
Regulus waves him off.
I'm on Veritaserum.
Regulus has his eyes on his brother.
And that's the question you want to break our agreement to ask.
He can feel the answer tickling the back of his throat, the sensation growing more and more insistent with every moment that he doesn't answer. There's a pause before Sirius nods.
Yeah.
It surprises Regulus. Sirius has never seemed to care much about their father before. But then, he supposes that's the Black family talent, isn't it? Aloofness.
Yes.
Regulus feels an exceptional amount of relief as he lets the truth escape his mouth.
I tell him you're okay, that we still talk. It makes him happy.
Sirius scrunches his face.
Why?
Merlin, Sirius, enough.
James is standing between them like he can physically shield Regulus from the questions. But this doesn't feel like foul play. Doesn't feel like Sirius trying to take advantage. At least not much. It feels sincere.
Because he loves you.
On this potion, he doesn't have to think. It just rips the thoughts from his head. Terrifying and convenient all at once. He sees the words hit Sirius. Knows how much more they mean because of the Veritaserum. Lupin steps a little closer to him, hand reaching out, squeezing his arm. It's work for Regulus to not look at James.
You really believe that?
It's only barely a question. More rhetorical than anything. But the potion doesn't distinguish between rhetorical and sincere. James doesn't like this. Regulus can see him getting antsy, and he knows he has a right to be. Regulus is letting Sirius take too many liberties. But he's been waiting for years for Sirius to care about their father.
Yes.
Sirius nods slowly, an expression on his face that Regulus can't decipher.
And you, Reg? You really hate me as much as you seem to?
He feels his eyes go wide.
No.
He grimaces.
I love you. Even when you hurt.
Well, isn't that embarrassing?
Sirius, this isn't fair.
Sirius doesn't take his eyes off of Regulus, and Regulus doesn't look away.
Are you okay, Reg? Do you need help?
Oh, fuck. He hadn't been expecting that one. He's been letting the potion take too much control and he can't stop himself. Can't modify his answer, can't stall. It just comes out.
I feel like I'm drowning.
Reg.
Honestly, this has been more than enough for Regulus.
I have to go.
He gets to his feet and books it towards the door.
Regulus!
Sirius reaches for him, but Regulus manages to squeeze past him, narrowly avoiding Sirius's fingers. He feels shaky and like he might be ill, pushing through the door of the classroom and into the hall on the other side. He is not going back to the Great Hall, not like this. Of course, he isn't exactly sure where he is going. The dorm? Merlin, all he needs is for someone to ask him where he's been or what he's been doing. Fucking Veritaserum. He has to go somewhere safe. Somewhere he can ride this out alone without anyone else picking at his fucking soul. He'd expected Sirius to try something, but he'd thought that it would be cruel. Something designed to make Regulus squirm. Not whatever the hell that was. He tries to suppress the memory of his own voice.
I feel like I'm drowning.
Merlin, why did the truth have to sound like that? So small and pathetic. Couldn't he have just said no? Why couldn't that be enough?
Reg.
He looks over his shoulder as James comes jogging down the hallway, then quickly checks that they're alone. James rolls his eyes.
Give me a little credit.
What are you doing? What did you tell them?
He looks behind James, waiting for his brother to appear, but he doesn't.
Told them I was going to check on Mary.
That causes Regulus's stomach to squirm more than it already was.
Oh.
I'm not going to leave you alone when you're on Veritaserum. Come on, let's go to the room.
That nearly stops him in his tracks.
Now?
Yeah, now.
What about dinner? Your friends?
James rolls his eyes again.
You think I give a shit about any of that right now? After this day? Come on.
He speeds up and Regulus realises it's so they aren't walking side by side. Because he, Regulus, doesn't want anyone to see them together. And he is simultaneously grateful and so sorry all at once. They walk like that all the way, James a decent distance ahead, enough that no one passing by would think that they had anything to do with one another, but still close enough that James can keep an eye on him, because Regulus knows James well enough to know that that's what he's doing. On another day, under different circumstances, it might irritate him, but today he just feels warmed by it. Maybe that's the Veritaserum too. By the time he gets to the spot on the 7th floor, James has already disappeared inside, Regulus following quickly after. This is reckless, being here so early, disappearing after a student has been dropped at the infirmary, bloodied and cursed. Yet still he feels himself relax the minute he crosses the threshold, no longer in danger of being stopped and asked something he would rather not answer. James is on the bed, legs crossed.
Are you...
He stops himself, frowning, and Regulus arches his brow in question.
Sorry, I'm trying not to ask you any questions.
Of course he is. Regulus toes off his shoes and moves towards the bed, sitting across from James. Their eyes meet, and after a few seconds, James reaches out and gently brushes a stray curl off of Regulus's face.
I'm sorry. I should have stopped Sirius.
It's fine. It was inevitable. I thought it would be worse.
James grimaces.
I'm still sorry.
Which is ridiculous. If anything, James is the one trapped in the middle here, between Regulus and his friends. Regulus and the rest of his life. It isn't fair. But then, none of what Regulus has asked of him is.
You can, you know.
James looks at him, confused.
Can what?
Ask me questions.
It's a dangerous door to open, and Regulus wonders if Lupin did something to the Veritaserum to make him act so carelessly. James's look of confusion doesn't go anywhere. Instead, it's joined by surprise and... fear, maybe?
Yeah, but you can't really say no. Or, under the...
James frowns, clearly frustrated with his inability to articulate himself. Not that Regulus needs him to. Regulus shrugs.
I trust you.
Weak. He watches James's eyes widen as he realizes how much that means while Regulus is still under the power of the potion. Personally, Regulus chooses not to think about it. There's another beat of stunned silence before a smile starts to pull at the corner of James's mouth that's all kinds of trouble.
All right.
James licks his lower lip, and it's impossible for Regulus to keep his eyes from following his tongue. The bastard.
First time you looked at me and thought, yeah, I'd shag that.
Regulus rolls his eyes, fully intending to say, I have never thought that, because he likes to think about himself as someone with a certain amount of dignity. Unfortunately, what comes out of his mouth is...
3rd year.
Regulus frowns.
My 3rd year or yours?
Mine.
It's uncomfortable to speak truths that you don't want to, but wholly unnatural to speak truths that you didn't even realise existed.
What did it for you exactly? My mastery of Quidditch? My witty sense of humour?
Yeah, that's likely.
James is undeterred.
My irresistible beauty.
Regulus feels the words coming up his throat and braces himself.
You took your shirt off.
Oh. Oh, wait. Maybe Regulus does remember this. The image of James walking up the hill from the Quidditch pitch fills his mind. He sees him grabbing the back of his shirt and yanking it over his head. Damn Regulus's 13-year-old self.
Irresistible beauty it is, then. You really have a thing for shirtless me, huh?
Yes.
Regulus winces. James is so happy he's practically vibrating.
Go on, then.
James knocks their knees together.
Ask me something.
Regulus arches his brow.
You take Veritaserum too?
Nah, but I'll tell you the truth anyway.
Honesty is easy for James Potter, but it still makes something pull on Regulus's heart.
Same question.
Because, honestly, he's been wondering for the last year what exactly it was that flipped James Potter. James tilts his head back, like he's looking for the answer on the ceiling.
I think it was probably Quidditch. Your first game last year.
He looks back at Regulus.
Or at least, that was when I couldn't ignore it.
Regulus rolls his eyes.
Of course you have a Quidditch kink.
Whoa, it's not a kink.
Regulus gives him a flat stare.
What? It's not, it's just... tight white pants, and you handle that broom so fucking well.
Sorry, was that a dick metaphor?
What? No, you're so powerful out there. So in control of everything, it's hot.
There's an actual blush on James's cheeks, and that happens so rarely, because James is shameless, that Regulus can't help but stare for a minute. He's not sure if James notices, but he must. He drops his eyes.
Go on then. Next question.
He sees the moment James thinks of a question and the moment he falters, like he doesn't know whether or not he can ask it.
James?
James looks up at him, sheepishly, and then away. He's scrubbing at the back of his neck, and Regulus finds himself intrigued now.
You really love me?
That takes Regulus by surprise.
You think I don't?
James shrugs.
No, I don't know. I think sometimes I can sort of push you into things.
Which is ridiculous, and Regulus is about to say so, except the truth is currently pushing uncomfortably against his teeth. He rolls his eyes, feeling confident in his answer, until he hears himself say,
I've loved you since I was 11 years old.
Regulus very promptly shuts his mouth. Because, yes, okay, he's thought that before, but he hadn't really believed it was true. It was hyperbole, melodrama, teen angst. He hadn't really thought. I mean, yes, it had felt like love, but all crushes do at 11, don't they? It's only after a few moments of spiralling that Regulus realises James hasn't said anything, which is entirely out of character for him. He looks up to find the other boy staring back at him, wide-eyed.
Since you were 11?
Regulus shrugs, but, of course, James phrased that as a question, and before he knows it, more words are bubbling out of his mouth.
It's always been you, really. For me.
And oh, boy, does he hate saying that out loud. Hate knowing that it's true. He closes his eyes then, like maybe if he can't see James, he'll forget those words ever came out of his mouth. Weak.
Reg.
Regulus keeps his eyes closed.
Yeah, okay. Maybe questions was a bad idea. We should move on. I've embarrassed myself enough for one day, I think.
Regulus.
Regulus isn't really sure what's going on, and then...
Can I touch you?
Where?
Face.
Slowly, Regulus nods, still not opening his eyes.
Yeah, okay.
When James's touch comes, it's soft and familiar, and after a moment, Regulus feels himself leaning into it. James starts by cupping his cheek, hand eventually sliding down so that his thumb can trace the line of Regulus's lower lip. Regulus feels oversensitive. Like with his eyes closed, every touch is 10 times more intense, goosebumps pebbling his skin. And after a while, James starts carding his hand softly through Regulus's curls.
Can I kiss you?
Yes.
James's hand falls to the back of his neck, pulling him forward, their mouths meeting gently. It starts sweet, their lips pressed together, Regulus's hands still at his sides. But slowly he feels the heat building, feels them falling onto the mattress, pulling themselves closer together. James's mouth opens, Regulus's hands slide under his shirt, soaking up the heat of his bare skin. James kisses along his jaw, down his neck, pulling lightly on Regulus's hair and ripping a groan out of him. Instantly the sound brings James's lips back to his, like he's trying to taste it. And then he slides his thigh between Regulus's legs, and the friction is...
Oh.
His eyes fly open for the first time. James pauses, pulling back just enough to see his face.
You okay?
Yeah. It's... good.
And it is, which is the problem. Regulus doesn't know what to do with good. He doesn't feel good during sex. He never has. He feels numb or he feels panicked, but this is...
Fuck.
He drops his head against James's shoulder, his body moving instinctually, without technique or grace.
You're so fucking beautiful.
James presses his mouth against Regulus's ear.
I can't stand it sometimes. I have these dreams. I wake up so fucking hard I barely need to touch myself.
Regulus's nails dig into James's arms as he ruts against him.
Sometimes all I have to do is think about your mouth and I get there.
Merlin, he's not going to last. And that thought hits him like a brick wall. Because he's never done this before with someone else, and he feels like his skin is alive with the anticipation. A tingly feeling running through him, making him shiver at the thought of what they're building up to. What he is building up to.
Still okay?
James's words are hot on Regulus's neck. He nods, not sure he can quite find his voice, nipping at James's lip and looking up to find James's eyes blown wide with desperation.
Christ.
James's hands are roaming over Regulus's body, touching every part of him, pulling him closer as Regulus keeps grinding against his thigh.
So good, Rich. So fucking good.
Regulus drops his head, pressing it against James's chest. There's a part of him through the haze of yes, 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 and more, 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 that is terrified. Terrified of the feelings building inside of him, terrified of the fact that James is seeing them, the fact that he has the power to cause them. Normally that terror takes over. Normally that terror takes all the good parts of this and turns them into dark bedrooms and hands covering his mouth. But then James starts sucking on his neck, going at it with purpose, and Regulus squirms under the attention, feeling like every nerve in his body is being turned on, holding him solidly in the moment, here and now.
I know it's fucked up. Sometimes all I think when I see you with other people is how much I want to fucking own you. To have them know that you're mine.
He keeps working on Regulus's neck between words, licking and kissing and biting.
Because you are, aren't you?
His voice rolls through Regulus like thunder.
Mine.
Regulus shivers. He should say no because it is fucked up. But James's voice and his hands and his mouth are making him feel loose and out of control in a way he isn't used to, and some pathetic, needy part of him wants to be owned, to be marked, to belong. James's teeth sink a little deeper into his skin, ripping the answer from Regulus's throat.
Yes.
James shifts, somehow managing to press more of himself against Regulus, the pressure sending a jolt of pleasure through Regulus's whole body. And suddenly he is nothing but feeling. No words or thoughts or distinguishable parts. Every molecule in his body humming with something that makes his toes curl and his voice crack. Noises leaving his mouth that he has no control over. For a minute he feels like a live wire. Every touch a little too much and also so fucking good. His heart beating fast as he collapses further into James, all the tension draining out of his body, leaving him boneless and sated. After a few minutes, or hours, or days, because honestly Regulus can't tell, he feels James kiss the top of his head, bringing him more into focus.
You okay?
Regulus nods, before realizing that he's been incredibly selfish.
Sorry.
Regulus's hand reaches out.
You must be...
He finds his way to James's crotch, which is damp and soft. He pulls back, looking at James, who has the audacity to hold his gaze without even seeming embarrassed.
James, did you just come from watching me?
James's cheeks are rosy as he smiles.
Might have, yeah.
Regulus watches the mirth drain from James's face instantly.
Reg?
And he wants to answer, except suddenly he's too hot with this new, overwhelming feeling in his chest. He rolls away from James onto his back, trying to breathe through it, only to find, to his horror, that he's crying. The tears are so bad his chest hitches and his shoulders shake, and he quickly brings his hands to his face. James is sitting up now.
Shit, Regulus, are you... Was that...
But Regulus shakes his head, unable to stop fucking sobbing.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm crying.
He wishes he sounded angry because he feels angry. Angry at himself for doing this.
Was it too much?
Again, Regulus shakes his head.
No. No, fuck. It was perfect.
James just sits there silently for a moment, and Regulus doesn't blame him. If he was James, he'd be walking out of the fucking room at this point because clearly Regulus is completely unhinged.
Can I touch you?
Merlin, it must be so annoying for him to have to ask that all the time.
Yes.
James shuffles up the bed a little, leaning against the headboard before pulling Regulus to him. On him, really, into his lap. And Regulus goes willingly, curling up against James's chest as James rests his chin on the top of his head.
I'm sorry.
Because he's so fucking mortified he doesn't know what else to say. James rubs circles into his back.
Are you okay?
Yes.
Were you okay before? While we were...
Yes.
James kisses the top of his head.
Then I don't know what you're apologising for.
Regulus doesn't bother dignifying that with an answer, and the Veritaserum must be wearing off because nothing compels him to.
It's a lot, Reg. It's a lot for me too. But as long as you're okay...
He feels James shrug.
I don't really care about the rest of it. Just don't let me push you, all right?
Regulus presses impossibly closer because James is warm and steady, and he is weak.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know where our wands are? Because I could really use a cleaning spell.
They shouldn't fall asleep. It's reckless. Tonight's theme, apparently. But they do anyway. James cleans the pair of them up and then wraps himself around Regulus again, and it's nice and easy. And Regulus is fucking exhausted after the past few days. It only takes a few minutes of James's warmth before his eyelids start to get heavy. He has a vague memory of James getting up at some point to take off his trousers. He has a thing about sleeping in trousers. Mainly his thing is that he won't do it.
Go back to sleep,
James says as he slides back into bed.
I should go.
Regulus has a sneaking suspicion that Mary MacDonald's attack is going to result in more intense curfew policing, and no doubt they'll already be looking into his dorm after what happened tonight at dinner. The last thing he needs to be doing is disappearing. Despite all that, he doesn't actually try to get up, instead rolling towards James and placing his head on his chest.
I'll wake us up early.
Regulus falls asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. When he blinks awake again, the room is still dark, and without windows it's hard to tell how much time has passed. Eventually, when he comes to enough, he realises that James is running his hand through his hair.
Hey.
Regulus nuzzles against James's chest before he can stop himself.
Hey.
Time to go.
Almost.
Regulus is enjoying the feeling of James's fingers brushing against his scalp. It takes a while before he's really able to process how early it must be. James has Quidditch practice at the crack of dawn, so if it isn't time to go yet, it must not even be 5 a.m. For some reason, that makes something tighten in his chest.
Did you sleep?
A bit. Couldn't quite get my brain to shut off.
Regulus's chest grows tighter.
What were you thinking about?
James doesn't answer, like he's pretending that in the absolute quiet of their room there's some way he could have not heard. Regulus considers letting it go, because right now this feels so good and he's afraid of ruining it. But eventually his curiosity gets the best of him.
James, what were you thinking about?
He feels wrung out after yesterday, from the fear and anxiety and intimacy. He's afraid he won't be able to handle what's coming.
Nothing. I was just thinking about yesterday and... Anyway, it's nothing.
But it is very clear from his tone that it is not nothing.
James.
You said...
It seems like James can't make up his mind about whether or not to continue. Eventually, he seems to accept that he's not getting out of this without giving Regulus something.
You said you felt like you were drowning.
Oh. Regulus had really been hoping they would just skip over that bit.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Regulus forces himself not to tense because he knows that James would be able to feel it.
I don't know.
The hand in Regulus's hair stills.
Reg.
Regulus sits up abruptly, shrugging James off as he rests his elbows on his knees and scrubs the remaining sleep from his eyes.
Please, James. Just leave it.
But for once, James doesn't listen to him.
I just don't understand. Because I'm here, Reg. I'm here. You don't have to... I'm not sure how to make you get that. How many times do I have to say it?
Regulus grinds his teeth.
And I'm not sure how many times I have to tell you that it's not enough.
That, Regulus is willing to admit, was the wrong thing to say.
Ah, okay then.
Regulus listens as James gets out of bed, feeling his heart sink. He watches him grab his trousers off the floor, pulling them up over his boxers.
James, I didn't...
Sorry that I'm not enough.
He doesn't look at Regulus when he says it. There's definitely anger there. Anger and a tangle of other emotions that Regulus doesn't want to be responsible for. James starts walking towards the door, which results in Regulus doing one of the most pathetic things he's done to date, including crying after sex, blocking his path. Like some heroine in a romance novel. It's clumsy, he's still sleepy, and he practically trips on his way to stand in front of the door.
Fuck. James, please. I didn't mean that.
James stops in front of him, staring for a long time, then runs a hand through his hair.
Thing is, Regulus, I think you did.
Not the way you...
Regulus tries to get himself in order.
I just meant that things with me are so big. They're too big to be solved by one person.
But he can tell before James even opens his mouth that he isn't buying it. Regulus wonders if that's some of his hubris bleeding through. Nothing is too big for James Potter, the saviour of all beaten dogs.
I got Sirius out.
It is work for Regulus to hold his tongue, to keep back the plethora of sharp remarks begging to come out of his mouth. He's getting incredibly tired of this comparison.
I am not my brother. His choices are not mine.
I don't think Sirius saw himself as having choices.
Well, he did.
And you don't think the same could be said about you?
No.
James shakes his head.
The problem, Reg, is that sometimes it feels like you want to be stuck. Like you've already told yourself the story of your life, decided where it's going to go, decided what you're going to get, and you're not willing to change it.
Regulus opens his mouth indignantly, but finds he doesn't really know what to say. He's wrong. James is wrong, but he can't find the words to tell him how. To tell himself how. He doesn't want to be stuck. Why would he want that?
Look, I have to get going. I have Quidditch.
No, Regulus wants to say. Get back in bed. I want to feel your hand in my hair. I want to feel your heartbeat. I want you to promise you still love me. Because he hadn't said it. Last night, Regulus had cut himself open and laid himself bare, but James hadn't said it. And he knows that it's just semantics, that it doesn't mean anything, but in this moment it feels important. His whole being revolts as he finds himself saying none of that, silently moving out of the way instead.
James?
James has one foot out the door. He turns back.
I love you.
Regulus fidgets, uncertainty smothering his words. There's only a brief pause, but it's enough to sting.
I love you too, Reg.
For the first time, Regulus isn't sure that he believes him.
Because I'm here, Reg, I'm here.
I'm not sure how many times I have to tell you that it's not enough.
James starts having nightmares again. He's not sure why. It's been almost a year, and it's not like anything has happened. At least not to him. They're different than they were before. Regulus is always standing alone in the dark. Not because it's nighttime or because someone has turned out the lights, but because there's nothing else. No walls or floors, no sky, no earth. Everything is black, and he's just sort of there, alone, afraid. James calls out to him, but he doesn't hear. Reaches for him, but he doesn't feel. And honestly, that's scary enough. To watch the terror growing in his eyes and not being able to do anything about it. The dreams could end there, and James would still wake up in a cold sweat. They don't end there, though. At some point, while James grows more hysterical in his attempts to get to Regulus to even just look at him, hands start reaching out of the dark. If they belong to bodies, James never sees them. Just hands. They're grab hold of Regulus's ankles, his calves, his wrists, and Regulus starts screaming, begging. James, James, James! His voice splits open, it cracks itself in two, calling out for him.
Because I'm here, Reg, I'm here.
And I'm not sure how many times I have to tell you that it's not enough.
James sits up, breathing heavy, sheets damp with sweat. He's shaking, biting down on his tongue to keep back whatever it is that's stuck in his throat. A sob, a scream, his supper. He cast a silencing charm over his bed before he went to sleep. He does it every night. He can only imagine the things he's yelling. It takes a few minutes, but he starts to settle, breathing slowly, evening out. It's late, but not nearly late enough. Still another 3 hours before he can justify getting ready for Quidditch practice. That being said, there's no way in hell he's going back to sleep. After a few seconds of indecision, he throws his blankets off, pulling himself out of bed. If he's going to be awake, he might as well be useful. He grabs the charms essay he'd been working on and slips out of the dormitory, trying not to resent the fact that Remus is clearly no longer sleeping in his own bed.
Oh my god, I can't believe it's stupid. God.
He trudges down to the common room.
Someone's up late.
His head snaps up as he reaches the last step, finding a pair of sparkling brown eyes staring back at him.
What the hell?
Mary cocks her brow.
And good evening to you too.
She's curled up in the corner of the couch, a pink housecoat James has never seen her wearing before wrapped around her, face washed clean of makeup, leaving her looking incredibly young.
Sorry.
James brings his free hand up to scrub his face.
I'm still a bit out of it.
Mary nods, eyes drifting towards the fire.
Tell me about it.
A long moment of awkward silence passes before she rolls her eyes.
Well, are you going to sit or are you going to keep standing there?
James snaps awake.
Oh, yeah, right.
He drops his coursework on the coffee table and collapses next to Mary on the couch. His head falling back so he ends up staring at the ceiling.
That was a big sigh.
James smiles dryly, rolling his head towards her.
No one gets up in the middle of the night for a little sigh.
The corners of her mouth twitch up.
Touché.
James turns back to the ceiling.
When are you allowed to start Quidditch again?
Because if he doesn't start talking, he's going to fall asleep, and that's the last thing he wants.
Not until after Christmas.
James winces.
Oh, fuck.
Head injuries are apparently serious.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that being mentioned.
Another pause, the low burning fire crackling in front of them. James wonders absent-mindedly what the house elves do if the common room never empties. Do they still come and clean it?
We'll hold strong until you get back. Only one more game anyway. We're gonna take it this year. I can feel it.
James looks at her. She's been back from the hospital wing all weekend, but tomorrow, today actually, he supposes, will be her first day in classes again. James nudges her gently with his foot.
You okay, Macdonald?
A long moment of silence passes.
Have you ever felt helpless?
Her eyes are still on fire. James nods, slowly.
Yeah, all the time.
Mary's fingers fidget with the sleeve of her housecoat. Despite the fact that she's sitting next to him, she feels far away, like she's drifting. James has the sudden desire to reach out and anchor her.
Not me. I know I've been helpless.
Mary bites down on her lower lip, and James isn't sure if she's going to continue.
When I was little, I used to watch all these movies, and no matter what the story was, the girl always needed to be rescued, like just constantly. It didn't matter if she was one of the heroes or a love interest or whatever, and I hated that. So I made this list in my head of all the things I needed to know. I thought, I'll learn all this stuff. How to swim and fight and untie knots and fly planes. I'll learn all this stuff and then I'll rescue myself.
James smiles, because, yeah, that sounds just like Mary. Even if he doesn't really know much about Muggle movies or what the hell a plane is.
And did you?
She swallows.
No. I got a letter telling me I was a witch. Figured, what do I need to learn how to fight for? I have a wand now. I have magic. Who's going to be able to touch me?
James doesn't know what to say to that. Most people would probably go with something along the lines of, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this happened. Sorry it happened to you. Sorry you're hurting. But he knows Mary well enough not to. It'd only irritate her.
Any word on Mulciber?
A cold smile spreads across her face.
They tried to expel him, but his parents are kicking up a fuss. They have friends in high places, apparently.
James grimaces.
Oh, fuck.
Mary nods.
They promised me, McGonagall and Dumbledore, that he won't be in class, that he'll be doing all his schoolwork in Slughorn's office. Temporarily, anyway.
Temporarily?
She nods.
Until he gets expelled or his parents get what they want and he's let off the hook.
He used an unforgivable. They can't just do nothing.
Mary's eyes narrow, glaring down at the fire.
Yeah, well, maybe not.
Maybe not what?
She keeps glaring.
Maybe he didn't use an unforgivable.
There's a beat of silence before James runs a hand over his face.
Okay, I'm pretty tired here. So you're going to have to explain that one to me.
I'm gonna have to explain it to myself too. They checked his wand.
James blinks.
Okay.
Mary grits her teeth. James can see the muscles sliding in her jaw.
No Imperius.
It takes a moment for that to really sink in.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you were so sure.
Yeah.
How?
The working theory is I hit my head so nothing I think is reliable.
Mary collapses back into the couch and closes her eyes, squeezing them shut. Her fingers come up and start massaging her temples. James shakes his head, trying to wrap his mind around this.
Just because he didn't Imperius you doesn't mean he didn't still...
Crack my skull open?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe?
Mary drops her hand and looks at him. There are only the tiniest cracks in Mary's shield, a speck of fear hiding in her eyes, in the corner of her mouth.
Maybe, but I hit my head, so nothing I think is reliable. Maybe he wasn't even there. Maybe I made it all up. Maybe I slipped and fell and the rest is just some delusion.
That's bullshit.
He almost gets a smile for that.
I think so too, believe it or not. But then a part of me almost hopes they're right.
Her hand goes to the back of her head. James wonders if she even knows she's doing it.
Why?
Her eyes have gone back to the fire, the light washing her out, exaggerating the bags under her eyes.
Because I've never been helpless.
James hasn't spoken to Regulus in days, and he thinks it's starting to get to him. Which, if he's being honest with himself, is a bit pathetic. So he does his best not to be honest with himself. It isn't on purpose, the not talking to Reg. Well, not on his end. He has a feeling Regulus is avoiding him, and he isn't sure why. Reg has excuses, of course. Prefect duty, homework, Quidditch practice, not to mention the professors have started patrolling the halls at night after the incident with Mary. And, as Regulus pointed out, not everyone has an invisibility cloak. James clings to these excuses, uses them to comfort himself when he starts feeling anxious. He knows they aren't true, of course, but it's easier to pretend. Which is also pathetic. He really hates being honest with himself.
Oi!
A balled-up piece of parchment collides with James's head.
Pay attention to me!
James rolls his eyes, turning onto his stomach so he can glare at Sirius, who is sitting on his own bed looking smug.
Oh, he's alive!
You're a brat.
Sirius's grin only widens.
One of my better qualities. You're going to tell me why you're sulking?
James frowns.
I'm not sulking.
That's a no, then.
Brat.
James lurches to the side just in time to dodge Sirius's pillow.
Good thing you're a beta, because you can't aim for shit.
James smirks as he pulls himself upright. Sirius gives him the finger.
Pretty sure betas need to aim. Or do you have yours just shooting bludgers in random directions?
I like to keep my players on their toes.
Uh-huh.
Sirius smirks, shaking his head.
Whatever you say, El Capitan.
Sirius has a pile of coursework around him that he's clearly been ignoring. To be fair, since he and Remus have started doing whatever it is that they're doing, Sirius has been a much better student. James is pretty sure getting work done is like foreplay for Remus.
So?
It's as though he can hear James's thoughts.
You shaggy boy yet?
A host of unwanted memories flood James's thoughts. Regulus pressed against him, the tiny sounds escaping his mouth like he couldn't help it, the look on his face when he'd...
Merlin, Sirius, what the hell?
James attempts to push all thoughts of Regulus out of his head, resenting the curl of want that he already feels in his stomach just from thinking about him. followed almost instantly by a pang of fear. Fear that he's never going to get to see Regulus like that again. Fear that something has happened that he didn't notice, and now it's all slipping through his fingers. They fought. He gets that. But it hadn't been a relationship ending, had it? Had it? Had it?
Merlin, you're such a prude.
Sirius leans back, knocking a few of his textbooks onto the floor.
Not a prude.
Sirius arches his brow.
No? How far have you two gotten then?
James has a very clear memory of Regulus telling him not to talk about sex with Sirius.
Listen, I don't...
Because me and Mooney...
Oh, Christ!
James grabs the pillow Sirius had thrown at him and holds it over his ears.
Don't you fucking dare.
Your face. Not a prude my ass.
Now it's James's turn to throw a pillow.
Are you trying to scar me or something? Merlin.
Listen. I'm just trying to figure out what the normal procedure is here.
James blinks back at him.
Normal procedure?
Yeah, you know, like, I know how it works with girls, how things progress, but this is new territory for me. What are the steps? What are the rules? Is it handjob, blowjob, and then...
Sirius raises his eyebrows, and James is not entirely sure that he even knows what's being implied.
Or are there other steps I'm missing?
Steps?
Now he just sounds like a parrot.
You know, like first base, second base, third.
Sirius is looking at James like he should know what they're talking about.
What's a base?
Sirius shrugs.
I don't know, it's just something people say.
James looks at him skeptically.
What people?
Just people. Look, forget about the bases. Just, how's this supposed to go? How do I up my game?
James runs a hand through his hair.
Shit, Sirius, I don't know. I don't really think about it that much. I just do what feels good.
Sirius looks at him for a minute before shaking his head.
I mean, it all feels good, I would hope. I just want to make sure I check all the boxes.
James feels terribly out of his depth.
Honestly, I'm the wrong person to talk to about this.
A funny expression flickers across Sirius's face.
You're the only person to talk to about this.
Which James realises might actually be true, and also is pretty tragic for the both of them, because he's pretty sure neither of them have a clue what they're doing. James doesn't even know what bases are.
Okay, well...
James rubs at the back of his neck.
I'm pretty sure as long as you're checking the getting off box, you're doing okay.
Wow. You really don't know shit about sex, do you?
James glares at him.
Fuck you.
After this conversation, I'd really rather you didn't.
Sirius is grinning. James is running out of pillows to throw.
Seriously, though.
Sirius moves back to the centre of his bed.
I've been doing some research.
James arches his brow.
Research? Is sex something you have to research?
Yeah, magazines and stuff. And there's so much shit I've never seen.
Sirius wrinkles his nose.
And some shit I do not need to see ever again. But it's like there's this whole world of sex out there that I didn't even know about. And things I never thought of, like lube. Do you use lube?
No.
Should he?
Apparently there's a spell for it, which I am sure as shit's gonna learn because that sounds convenient as hell.
James is only vaguely aware of what you might use lube for. He wonders if Reg knows more about this stuff, but then he doubts Regulus is spending his free time researching sex.
So, what do you reckon?
James blinks, looking back at Sirius, who is watching him expectantly, and James has the feeling that he's missed something.
About?
Sirius waves his hand impatiently.
Top or bottom?
Which makes absolutely no sense to James, so he just keeps staring blankly at Sirius, who eventually starts smirking.
Oh, come on, James. You know what I'm saying?
No, he really doesn't. James keeps staring.
Merlin, I can't believe I have to explain this to you.
James feels a little snippy about being patronised.
Nobody's asking you to.
But one of Sirius's favourite hobbies is knowing more than other people, and James can already see the look in his eyes that means there's no way Sirius is going to pass up on this opportunity.
Are you the one getting or, giving?
Even that, James is embarrassed to admit,
takes him a minute to figure out. But he does figure it out, without needing any more clarification from Sirius, thank Merlin.
Oh, Christ, really, Sirius?
It's a valid question.
According to who?
Sirius waves his arms around.
People, James, people! Merlin, it's like you've never heard of sex in your life.
I've heard of sex.
If you say so.
Reading a magazine doesn't make you a prostitute.
Because it's true, but it doesn't seem to bother Sirius.
I'll lend you some if you want.
I really don't need your second-hand wank material, thanks.
But Sirius just grins.
Sure about that? You might learn something. Your boy would appreciate it, I'm sure.
James shakes his head.
This is officially my least favourite conversation I've ever had.
Do you need me to explain what a condom is?
Oh, that's it. I'm leaving. I hate you. Goodbye.
Maybe that's too advanced.
Because Sirius is objectively an evil person.
We can start simpler. See, kissing is when two people...
James shoves him on the way out of the room. James.
I'm here, Reg.
I'm not sure how many times I have to tell you that it's not enough.
James and Mary end up falling into a kind of routine, one which largely involves the two of them sleep-deprived and sitting on the couch in the Gryffindor common room in the middle of the night. Sometimes Mary brings the Muggle sweets her parents send her from home. James was sceptical at first, but it's actually pretty good. And nothing is vomit-flavoured or trying to bite him, so he might even like it better than wizard sweets. He says as much to Mary, who laughs. They talk a lot, because there's not really anything else to do. James gives up on trying to get homework done. He might not be able to sleep, but that doesn't mean he's fully functioning at 3 a.m. He learns a lot about Mary, who, apparently, he didn't know as well as he thought. He learns that she has 3 siblings, all muggles like her parents. He learns that her brother plays football, which is like Muggle Quidditch.
Well, actually, it's nothing like Quidditch at all, but same idea.
Mary corrects herself, succeeding only in further confusing James.
How can it be nothing like Quidditch, but also the same idea?
Mary gives him an exasperated look, like that's the stupidest question she's ever heard.
They're both sports?
James decides to let it go. He learns other stuff too, like that Amos Diggory is apparently a very bad kisser.
Too many teeth.
James does not press her for details. And that butter tarts are her favourite dessert, and lilacs are her favourite flowers, and she's never been to Paris, but she's certain she'll end up there one day, living in some beautiful apartment, buying bread at the local bakery every morning, and drinking red wine and smoking hand-rolled cigarettes.
I can just feel it, you know? That's where I'm supposed to be.
He smiles back, her energy a little contagious, even in the middle of the night.
I'm sure you'll get there.
He tells her stuff too, of course. About his parents. His mum.
They wanted a kid so bad. Tried everything. Tried for ages.
James is on the floor, leaning back against the couch.
Sometimes I feel the weight of that. Of being their miracle. Of trying to deserve all the love they've spent years saving up. Does that sound selfish? That my biggest problem is being loved too much?
Mary shakes her head.
No. It makes perfect sense.
They remind him of the astronomy tower, these little talks. Remind him of those first few weeks of sneaking up there to see Regulus before he really knew what he was doing. Where any of it was going. Of sitting and talking for hours and hours about nothing and everything. It makes his chest ache so badly his hand comes up to press against his ribs, like he's trying to keep something in. Keep something together. It's been nearly a week now since he last talked to Reg. He stares at the map every night, but Regulus never goes to the room. Yesterday, James went anyway. Because he missed it. Because he had this ridiculous hope that somehow Regulus would know that he was there. He doesn't know what he did. So he runs through everything they said the morning after the Veritaserum. Runs through it again and again. Making new wounds. Pouring salt in the old ones. He's told Regulus once that even if he walked away, he would always come back. It had never occurred to him that one day there wouldn't be anyone to come back to. Mostly he just misses him. With his whole body. With every inch of himself.
What are your nightmares about?
Mary is lying on the couch on her back, James mirroring her position on the carpet, both of them staring at the ceiling. The question comes after a long period of silence.
You don't have to tell me.
Mostly, when he can help it, when he's awake, he does his best not to think about his dreams, not to go back there, not to let those images in. Hands and darkness, and Regulus screaming his name. He shivers.
Letting someone down.
James decides to keep it vague.
There's someone who needs me, and I can't get to them. I'm there and I can see it all happening, hear them screaming, but I can't save them.
He closes his eyes briefly, swallowing. There's a moment of silence and James wonders if Mary's actually fallen asleep.
You really are the Gryffindor poster boy, huh?
Don't think Gryffindors had nightmares. Too brave.
You can't be brave if you aren't afraid of something.
Isn't that the definition of bravery? Being fearless?
James turns his head just in time to see her roll her eyes.
No. Bravery is facing your fears, standing your ground when you want to run. Only psychopaths are fearless.
James has never thought about it like that before. Never thought of fear as a necessary part of bravery. Though he supposes he should have.
What are your nightmares about then?
It's funny that he somehow manages to hear Mary go silent even though she hadn't been speaking to begin with. There's a shift in the space around her, a tightening of her whole body.
You don't have to answer.
The silence stretches on and James watches her profile from his spot on the floor. Watches her chest rise and fall. He tries not to fidget, fights the urge to speak. Eventually Mary closes her eyes.
I think I was raped.
The first thing he thinks is, Regulus never says it. Can't even hear the word. The second thing he thinks is, Merlin.
I dream about it. I can feel the weight of him. I can smell him, his skin.
Did you tell McGonagall?
James doesn't know if that's the right response.
Dumbledore.
Mary has a wry smile in the corner of her mouth.
They barely believe me about the curse. Can't imagine they'll take this very seriously. I don't even know what I would say. That I have dreams about some boy lying on top of me, that I don't know what's going on, but I know I don't want it, I don't like it. I'm not even sure I believe me.
Something twists in James's stomach.
I believe you.
Mary opens her eyes at that, turning to look at him.
Yeah?
James nods, sitting upright so he can look at her properly.
Yes.
You know, I hit my head pretty hard. Not a very reliable source.
I believe you.
After a minute, she gives him a sad smile.
You're a good guy, James Potter.
Mary. What do you need? What do you want to do? What do you need?
He doesn't know. He doesn't know what to do. Just knows that if she tells him, he'll do it. She shakes her head.
I don't know what I need, honestly.
You want me to beat the shit out of Mulciber?
James isn't entirely sure he won't do that anyway. Mary presses the heels of her hands into her eyes. Not the way people do when they're crying, but like she has a headache. Like she's trying to push something through the back of her skull. James wants to tell her to be careful. He doesn't.
I don't think it was Mulciber.
James takes that in, nods, ignoring the nauseous feeling he has about this whole thing.
Okay.
She drops her hands, turning to look at him, still lying down.
See? Unreliable.
James decides to ignore that.
You said you remember other Slytherins hanging around in the hall.
She nods.
I don't think it was them, either.
Who do you think it was?
There's a long pause before she shakes her head.
I don't know. I don't know anything. I have fucking brain damage or something.
You could go a little easier on yourself here, Mary.
Because she could.
They're gonna get away with it. Because they're boys. Because they're rich. Because my head is broken and I can't get my story straight. They're gonna get away with it. And it makes me so angry. Because something...
Mary blinks the moisture from her eyes.
Something bad happened. Something really fucking bad happened and I can feel it. in my chest and under my nails and behind my teeth, and I must have taken 100 showers since I woke up in that fucking hospital bed, but I can't seem to wash it off.
James reaches out, squeezing her arm.
You're remembering things. It's coming back, just like Pomfrey said it would. Give it a few days, a week. See if your memory clears.
James can feel her shake under his hand. He can't imagine how she feels, how much this hurts. He tries, but he can't.
I don't know if I can stand it.
Her eyes squeeze shut.
They're not going to get away with it. I promise.
The silence stretches on for a long time before her mouth flicks up at the corner, eyes still closed.
Of course you do. Bloody Gryffindor poster boy.
He watches the map, doesn't sleep. Watches the map some more, doesn't sleep. Watches Regulus walk to and from class with his friends. Watches him spend as little time in the common room as possible and as much time in his dorm as he can. Doesn't sleep. Watches him avoid the library, the Quidditch pitch, anywhere else James could reasonably run into him, talk to him. Doesn't sleep. Sometimes he gets angry. Breaks an inkwell by accident when he's throwing things around too aggressively. Very much on purpose, he destroys one of his textbooks by chucking it at the wall. Shoves the map roughly into his bedside table and swears not to look at it again. Swears that he doesn't care. If Regulus wants to sulk or freeze him out to do whatever the hell bullshit thing he's doing, then he can. James is tired. He's so fucking tired and he doesn't care, so there. Except he does care. Cares a pathetic, all-consuming amount. Except he always takes the map out again, follows the same name around the castle. Wonders what he did. Wonders what Regulus is thinking. Doesn't sleep. Doesn't sleep. Doesn't sleep. And then it happens. He sees Regulus alone for the first time in days, and he practically sprints out of the dorm. Doesn't answer Remus or Peter when they ask where he's going. Doesn't stop to grab the invisibility cloak. It's just after supper, 8 o'clock, almost curfew. The sun through the castle windows is orange and pink and setting the sky on fire as it drips towards the horizon. James jogs to the random corridor on the 3rd floor, hopes Regulus is still there, hopes he hasn't gone too far. He's almost given up when he finds him, standing in front of one of the windows. James stutters to a stop. Somehow, through the anger and fear and ache, he feels his breath catch. Fuck, he thinks inelegantly. He's so beautiful. For a moment, James can't move. Can't bring himself to ruin the picture in front of him. He's so beautiful. His thoughts ramble on. I love him so much. James really is screwed here. The sudden realization hitting him like a bludgeon to the chest, because he doesn't know what he's going to do if Regulus is finished with him. Doesn't know how he's going to get over this. It's a cliché. The teenager thinking they're in love. Something his parents would laugh about. Call cute and pinch his cheeks. But this doesn't feel cute. This feels like the person he wants most in the world has been avoiding him for days. He can't sleep, and he can't think, and looking at him hurts. Loving him hurts.
Regulus?
His head snaps in James's direction so quickly it's almost startling. Hand going predictably to his wand before he recognizes James, and then his eyes scan the space around them. Always hiding. Always so afraid of being seen.
We shouldn't.
You're avoiding me.
James steps closer, watching as Regulus barely suppresses a wince. He doesn't answer, just turns his head, looking down at the ground. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts.
What did I do? I need you to tell me what I did.
You didn't do anything.
Then what happened?
James takes another step closer. Regulus still not looking at him.
James.
Everything feels a little fuzzy. His pulse beating too fast, fear clawing at his ribs.
Are you ending this?
Regulus doesn't even try to hide the flinch this time. Doesn't try to answer either. Just stands there. The silence making James's skin feel too tight. He really needs to sleep.
Reg?
Regulus won't look at him. Still doesn't answer. It feels like one of his nightmares. He knows it isn't. He digs his nails into his palm so he can feel the sting. Counts the fingers on his hands. He knows this isn't a nightmare, but Regulus won't look at him, won't speak. He bends over, grabbing his knees, trying to breathe, trying to not be sick. He really needs to sleep.
James?
Regulus sounds far away. James is still trying to keep his dinner down. He hears the sound of footsteps, but he doesn't raise his head.
Merlin, James, are you okay?
He shakes his head.
Are you ending this?
He needs to know. He just needs to know. James doesn't know what that means. Frustration, maybe? And then there's a hand in his hair, on his face, his shoulders, forcing him upright.
I want to be enough.
He's barely able to meet Regulus's eyes.
I want to be enough.
Merlin, James.
Regulus is holding his face between his hands like he's forgotten they're still in the middle of the hallway. His eyes big and grey and full of regret.
I didn't mean it.
You did.
Regulus shakes his head.
You're enough. You're more than enough. You're so much more than I deserve. That's the problem, can't you see it?
His thumbs stroke James's cheeks.
Where have you been, Reg?
Regulus's usually schooled expression cracks.
I'm just trying to do the right thing.
Which makes no sense to James at all.
The right thing?
Mr. Black.
Regulus jumps back, hands dropping from James's face as he whips around. McGonagall walking towards them down the hall. James watches the colour drain from Regulus's face, and he wants to reach out and steady him, but he knows that would only make it worse.
Professor?
To McGonagall's credit, she only gives James a brief glance, like finding the pair of them embracing in the middle of the hallway is completely normal.
The headmaster would like to see you in his office.
Regulus visibly stiffens.
What? Why?
McGonagall arches her brow in his direction, but doesn't dignify that question with an answer.
Of course, Professor.
James has heard that tone before. Knows that it means Reg is scared. He doesn't look back at James. Just starts walking like they weren't in the middle of...
Mr. Potter, I believe it is almost curfew. Perhaps you'd better head back to your dormitory.
James blinks, tearing his eyes away from Regulus's shrinking back, barely resisting the urge to go after him.
What's happened?
Surely you must know that I can't disclose that information to you.
James swallows with difficulty.
Is he in trouble? Has something happened with his family?
Mr. Potter.
Can't I wait for him? I'll just wait outside, I swear. I just don't want him to be... We're supposed to be in pairs, right? If we have to go somewhere after curfew. So I can just...
James.
His mouth shuts at the use of his first name, all further protest dying on his tongue. McGonagall gives him an appraising look over the top of her glasses. He's not sure what she sees.
I will make sure that Mr. Black gets safely back to his dormitory. But right now, I need you to go to yours.
James still doesn't move.
That wasn't a suggestion.
His hands are shaking. Regulus now gone, disappeared around the corner at the end of the hall. It's painful, swallowing his questions, his fear, his indignation. Painful, nodding his head and turning back in the opposite direction. He feels useless, helpless. All the things he keeps trying to convince Regulus that he isn't. It burns the inside of his skin. I'm here, Reg, I'm here. I'm here, Reg. I'm here, I'm here, I'm...